Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
The fast train was rushing at full speed to the capital. Tree crowns, roofs of houses flashed outside the window. Clouds flew by. The carriage was noisy. People were getting on and off at stops, drinking, eating, smoking. And only one strange young girl in a black tracksuit and a cap pulled over her eyes sat quietly in the corner and prayed to herself. Lord, did I really escape? I wish they hadn't found me. How frightening. What's waiting for me next? I wish they'd come soon. Olivia got off at the railway station. The noise of the capital deafened her and seemed huge compared to the small town she came from. She looked jittery. No one seemed to be watching her. Exhaling, she took a sip of water and staggered off to nowhere. At a busy intersection, an elderly woman was trying to cross the road. She was dragging an unliftable bag and huffing and puffing, but the wheel had fallen off and the bag was dragging so heavily on the pavement that it was barely moving at all. Olivia instinctively approached. "Excuse me, can I help you?" "Let me take the bag. Come on while it's green." The girl helped the elderly woman cross the road, and they both sat down on a bench at the bus stop. The woman began to thank Olivia. "Oh, my daughter, thank you for helping me. I sell all sorts of things near the metro. I sell old books, some things. My pension is penniless. I don't even have enough for medicine. And you're a newcomer, aren't you? You've decided to look for a prince in the capital too? You fly like moths to a flame, but not many people are lucky enough. By the way, my name is Mrs. Vanessa. What's yours?" The girl sighed. "I'm Olivia. And I'm not looking for anyone. I've already been burned. Enough misfortunes are following me around. It's a long story. I have to start a new life somehow, but my pocket is empty. I'll look for some work. There's nowhere to live either. Well, that's my problem. You don't need them. I'm off, goodbye. Or maybe you want me to help you carry your bag home. Or what are you going to do?" Mrs. Vanessa took a hard look at the stranger and agreed. "Oh, I wouldn't say no if you're in no hurry, and then we'll see how it goes." The girl helped her grandmother to the house. It was a small but strong house near the railway station. Old furniture, dust everywhere, a little neglected. It was obvious that the old woman didn't have the energy to clean it. Olivia stomped into the hallway and was about to leave, but Mrs. Vanessa stopped her. "Go and get some water, Olivia. There's a well in the yard. We'll have tea. I've bought some lambs. We can talk about life. I'm so bored here alone. Besides, you said yourself you had nowhere to go." Olivia was taken aback. "Yes, right away, Mrs. Vanessa. Aren't you afraid to let a stranger in the house? You don't know me at all. What if I'm a thief or a con artist?" Granny grinned and replied, "Oh, my dear, why should I be afraid? You see, I don't live poorly. There's nothing to steal from me. And besides, I've worked with minors all my life. I know people better than any psychologist. And I look at you and I see that you're not happy. You look lost. And I'd carry an old woman's bag all the way across town if I thought it was for profit. And that's just it. So go on, get some water, we'll have tea." During the tea, Olivia did not notice how she began to pour her heart out to this complete stranger. "I've been unlucky since birth, that's what I think. I lived in a small town, 100 kilometers from here. My mom worked as a postman. The wages were small, and we could barely make ends meet. But she loved me so much. She always took pity on me, doted on me. I don't know anything about my father, so Mom avoided the subject. When I was little, she told me stories about a scout or a pilot, and then I stopped asking. And when I was 10, my stepfather came to our house, Uncle William. What did my mom see in him? I still don't understand. He was an arrogant hog and a bore. He didn't like me right away. At first he just ignored me. Then he started bossing me around and shouting at me. He could give me a slap, and he liked to drink. And when he got drunk, Mom and I had no life at all. He always reproached my mother that she should bow at his feet, since he took her with a trailer. Mom wasn't happy herself. She tried to kick him out. But it was like in the fairy tale about the fox, who settled in the hare's hut and threw him out. It got worse. My stepdad started to get handsy. I hid under the bed, crying from such an unbearable life. Mummy was sick. She was getting thin, as if this monster was pulling her strength out of her. And when I was 15, my mom died of a serious illness. You know what it was like for me to stay with my stepdad. I spent the night at a friend's house. I didn't come home until nightfall, just to avoid those evil eyes. I barely made it to adulthood. That's when I met this bloke, Samuel. He used to come round and buy us all a lot of drinks. So before I knew it, I was in love. He was 5 years older than me. He seemed like a hero, courageous, not afraid of anything. But my stepdad went off the rails, started drinking heavily. And one day he burnt down our house after falling asleep drunk with a cigarette. So I was homeless. Samuel helped me, got me a flat, and we started living as a family. I was so happy, and I got pregnant. We even applied for a marriage license. Samuel loved me. I could feel it. But he didn't tell me much about himself. I didn't even know what he was doing. Just some obscure friends. He'd leave in a hurry at night, come back 24 hours later. Said he was running another shop. And I, naive fool, believed it all. And then he disappeared. He left and never came back. I came home and he was gone. And his things were gone. No note, nothing. Phone switched off too. An hour later, 2 big foreheads came into my flat. They shook me like a pear, demanded I pay them back. Turns out Samuel had taken out some loans and hadn't been paying, and he'd been gambling in an underground casino. I cried, said I didn't know where he was. But they just said, if Samuel's not here, you'll pay us back, we'll put you on the meter. Look for the money wherever you want, and if you don't, we'll bury you alive. Believe me, they weren't kidding. I was so scared. I packed my bag and ran to the railway station. I took a ticket for the first train and went. All the way there, I prayed those thugs wouldn't track me down. That's the whole story. How to live and what to do. I can't imagine. Pregnant fool with no money, no place to live. And practically on your head too. But don't worry, Mrs. Vanessa. I have a conscience. I'll leave now. I'll probably have to have an abortion before it's too late. There's no other way out. What am I going to do with a baby now? How am I going to raise it? My problems are none of your business. I'm sorry for following you like a stray dog. The old woman shook her head and sipped hot tea from a saucer. She was silent for a long time, and then she said quietly, "Now, Olivia, don't get hot and heavy-handed. You've had a lot of grief, of course. You wouldn't wish it on an enemy. Stay with me for the time being. You don't need any money for accommodation. But if you'll help me with chores, I'll be glad. I can't bear to clean the windows or the floors myself. And it's more fun together. It's not so lonely. And about the child, I'll tell you this, don't you dare think about sin. Look at me, all my life alone. My husband died a long time ago, and we never had children. My Tom never knew it was my sin until the last moment. I was also afraid when I was young, and I blamed myself all my life. There's a proverb, God will give you a child. He will give you a child. You have to believe. Everything will work out. As your baby, no one will love you. You'll thank me later." Olivia was immensely grateful to this kind, sympathetic woman who took her in and let her live with her. She was not lazy, kept the house clean, washed the curtains, cooked every day. They lived amicably, as if they were relatives. Mrs. Vanessa willingly shared details of her life. She too had been through a lot. She said that her first love was so strong that she lost her head, but it didn't work out, and also often boasted that somewhere there's a family antique jewelry, even pre-revolutionary times, left by her ancestors. But Olivia didn't take that story seriously. She thought she was an elderly person, so maybe she misspoke or got something mixed up in her old age. Pregnancy was difficult, toxicosis, and she was dizzy all the time, and Olivia was afraid to go to the hospital. She had neither a propiska nor registration. They would not accept her. In order not to be left without money, the girl got a job handing out leaflets near the metro. They paid pennies, but she had enough for food and some things. But every day she was getting worse. Her stomach ached, her back was pulling, and she felt very nauseous. Her legs were swelling. So one day Olivia was very cold, the weather with a terrible snow and rain and wind, and she couldn't stand it. She fainted in the street. Olivia woke up in the hospital. She was lying under a drip, remembered absolutely nothing. Her whole body was aching. She wanted to turn round somehow. She wrinkled her nose and tried to change positions. And then a woman, a neighbor in the ward, cheerfully exclaimed, "You're finally awake, poor thing. I'll get the doctor. Mr. Peter Schull is on duty today. He's been coming round a lot." A pleasant, middle-aged obstetrician-gynecologist with a funny hat and thick-lensed glasses entered the room. He sat down in the chair next to Olivia's bed and started asking questions. "Hello, my name is Mr. Peter Schull. I'm your attending physician. I have a lot of questions for you. So, what's your name? How old are you? Where's your chart and what hospital are you registered with? I have absolutely no information." That's the first time I've ever seen anything like that. The girl looked up and hesitated to answer. "My name is Olivia Smith. I'm 19. I'm new to your town. I haven't had a chance to register yet. I'm sorry, can you tell me what's wrong with me and the baby? All I remember is that I felt very sick and my head was spinning." The doctor took his head, fixed his glasses, frowned and began to reprimand the patient. "God, what irresponsibility. Term 16 weeks, and you are still not registered. This is unheard of. How can you be so negligent about your health? Your urine protein is off the charts, sweetheart. That means you have an infectious kidney disease. It's very dangerous in your condition. You've probably had weakness, nausea, lower back pain. So what took you so long? They're young people. Well, you're going to need serious treatment, and we'll choose the drugs carefully so as not to harm you. I'll write you a prescription. Is someone coming to see you? Do you have someone to get the drugs you need? Plus you're anemic. That needs to be treated too. Why are you looking at me so weird? But can you hear what I'm saying to you? You'll be out of eyes in a minute, and you'll go for an ultrasound. I'll tell the nurse to escort you." Olivia sobbed childishly, her lips quivering. "No one's coming to see me. I don't have anyone. A kind grandmother let me stay with her, but she's not even related to me. Don't scold me, please. I'll leave so I don't have to take up space. I've got nothing to treat me anyway." Mr. Schull looked at this poor, frightened child, who was still a child, and suddenly something in his soul turned upside down. All strictness evaporated, and he wanted to hug the poor thing and feel sorry for it. The doctor changed his tone, carefully took her thin, cold palm in his, and said decisively, "I'm the one who apologizes. I jumped in without realizing. But I won't let you go. You're in a really dangerous condition, and you'll be lost on the street. Anyway, why don't you go to the ultrasound and I'll come back later?" Olivia was taken to the ultrasound, and it wasn't all smooth sailing. The girl got upset, lay down on the bed and cried bitterly, burying herself in the sterile hospital pillow. Her full ward mate, Zoe, of course, heard everything. She too felt sorry for this young, confused girl. She sat down beside her, stroked her skinny shoulder and said, "Don't cry, it's not good for you. The baby already feels everything, and it makes him feel bad. Take an apple, it's chemical-free, from my garden, and have a sandwich. I've got bags of food from home anyway. I've got nowhere to put it. You'll see Mr. Peter Schull will think of something. He's a golden man. I'm having my third baby with him. He'll fix you, don't worry. You just have to trust him, listen to him, and follow his advice. He looks so strict, but he's very good and kind." Olivia wiped away her tears, thanked Zoe and ate an apple and a sandwich with sausage, butter, and cheese. The women talked, and an hour later Mr. Peter Schull came back into the room. He brought a huge bag, began to put a pile of medicines on the bedside table, put on Olivia's bed a dressing gown and slippers, hygiene products, and other goodies. And he said sternly, "Okay, I think I've got everything. You're going to need this. Stop making the room damp and get yourself better. I'll see you tomorrow for rounds. My shift's over. Goodbye, Olivia." The girl opened her mouth in surprise. She began to thank the doctor profusely. "Thank you so much. You must have spent a lot of money. And I'm a complete stranger to you. I don't even know when I can give you the money, but I have some in my jacket pocket. I handed out flyers when I got sick." The stern doctor smiled. "Stop thanking me all the time. I do it out of the goodness of my heart. I can see you're in a difficult situation. No one is immune to it. We'll talk about gratitude later. when you're strong enough. Get some rest." Zoe winked at Olivia. "There you go, I told you, the golden man. And you were crying. He must have taken a shine to you. He cares about you like you're a relative. Such a specialist, and a man should be appreciated. He's worth his weight in gold." The hospital days dragged on. After a fortnight, her tests improved significantly. Olivia was no longer nauseous or in pain. She was about to be discharged, and the girl was sad again. The thing was, she'd grown so used to Mr. Peter Scholl. He often came round to see her and encouraged her and cheered her up. Olivia felt safe around him. She felt so at peace. And now she would soon be discharged and would never see her idol again. But on discharge day, a miracle happened. Mr. Peter Scholl came into the ward and asked Zoe to come out for a moment, and he began to talk. "Well, Olivia, your health is much better now. The rest of your medication can be taken at home in pill form. I'm discharging you, and I have something to offer you. I understand you have no one waiting for you and nowhere to go. I'd like to offer you a live-in job. I've got a mom who can't get up. She needs care, nothing complicated. Hygiene procedures and massages done by a visiting nurse. Your job is just to look after her during the day. Give her a cup, feed her, adjust her pillow. If there's anything wrong, you call me. You can see how busy I am. I'm always worried about her. I come home late. I'll feel more comfortable this way. You'll live in a small bedroom. I'll make all the arrangements. What do you think of the offer?" Olivia wondered if she could do it, or if she could be a carer. She had no experience. But she was so grateful to Mr. Peter Scholl and so reluctant to leave him that she agreed. She didn't want to offend him by refusing. She said, "All right, I agree. But first I'll go and see Mrs. Vanessa, the woman who took me in, and explain everything to her. I'm missing and she's probably worried." The girl went to the old woman. She began to embrace her, lamented, and even cried. "Olivia, my darling, you're here. I've been worried sick. I was so attached to you. I've been beating myself up. Why did you leave? Why did you disappear? Maybe I did something to offend you. Well, tell me what happened." Olivia told me everything. She was genuinely happy to see you too. It was amazing that even though they'd only known each other for a short time, there was such a connection between them. It was as if they were grandmother and granddaughter. The lady of the house listened to her guest and shook her head. The doctor, of course, well done. So supported you and put you on your feet. You're right, he should be thanked. But caring for a bedridden man, not an easy job. You need patience and mercy. But you're kind, helpful, you can do it. I'm sorry you're leaving. I'll miss you." Olivia hugged the old woman and promised, "Thank you for understanding me. I'll visit you often. Don't worry, where would I be without you?" They hugged like family, and Olivia went to the doctor's house. From that moment on, it was like she was in another world. The house was oak, spacious and well built. The renovations were modern. Everything was in light colors. Olivia looked around admiringly. A girl who had grown up in poverty, such comfort was something incredible. Mr. Peter Scholl had put her in a small but cozy room. He had thought of everything in detail, and they went into his mother's bedroom to get acquainted. A sad old woman was lying on a special bed for the seriously ill, leafing through a magazine. When she saw her son with a stranger, she frowned. "Sonny, who is that with you? And why is she here?" Peter replied seriously, "This is Olivia. She's going to live with us now and look after you. I'm at work 24 hours a day. It'll make me feel better. And don't be angry, please. Olivia's a very nice girl. She's just in a difficult situation." Then he turned to the girl. "Your mum's name is Mrs. Samantha. Breakfast must be oatmeal with milk. Lunch is to mum's taste. And don't forget to give her medicine. I'll tell you all about it. And keep her company so she doesn't get lonely. Can you do that?" Olivia nodded her head. "I'll do my best. I can clean the house if I have to. I'm a good cook. Don't worry, your mum will love it." Mr. Scholl smiled. He liked this young, frightened girl more and more. She was a young creature, not yet living, and she had already suffered so much grief. Olivia got to work. The doctor was up at the crack of dawn. always exercising in the courtyard and dousing himself with ice water. She admired his willpower while she prepared a light breakfast for both the landlady and Mr. Peter Schull. It turned out that he was a very unpretentious eater. It's not hard to prepare a tasty meal when the fridge is full. But things didn't go well with Mrs. Samantha. From day one, she was dissatisfied with everything. The porridge was too thick, too runny, too hot. Olivia tried to get in touch with her, but nothing worked. The old woman kept trying to hurt her. "Honey, do you think I'm a sick old woman who doesn't know anything anymore? You're wrong. Well, I understood everything about you at once. You pretended to be a poor little lamb and got into Peter's confidence. So he took pity on you, brought you into the house. So you don't need to talk to me. What's there to talk to you about?" And when Mrs. Samantha realized Olivia was pregnant, she went ballistic. "No, it's unheard of. My son is out of his mind. Maybe you're going to put your baby on him too. What do you talk to him about in the evenings? I'll talk to my son today, and you'll be out of here." Mrs. Samantha really tried to press her son, but he was adamant. "Mom, yes, Olivia's pregnant. I'm the one who treated her in my severe pathology department. She's a wonderful person. She looks after you so well, and she cooks to perfection. I don't know what your problem is. In fact, I like Olivia a lot. But look at my ex-wife Linda, she was a real bitch. She makes Olivia look like an angel. Stop nagging, please." Olivia began to notice certain oddities she couldn't explain, like putting the cup in one place in the evening, and then in the morning it's in a slightly different place. And most importantly, Mrs. Samantha couldn't get it out of bed and move it. And at night, strange sounds were heard from her ward's room, like creaking floorboards, as if someone was walking on them. One day there was even a scandal. Olivia heard the bed creak again, then as if footsteps. She couldn't stand it any longer and decided to check if there was a sick person in need of help. Olivia knocked. As always, the fuss increased first, and the old woman shouted menacingly. "Who's there?" The girl asked. "It's Mrs. Samantha. Are you all right in there? I'm worried. I thought I heard someone walking around. Can I come in?" So without waiting for an answer, Olivia flew into the room. The woman was lying in bed screaming like nothing had happened. "What do you want? What are you doing here? I just fell asleep, and you woke me up. Go away. I don't want to see you. You brought misfortune on my head, son." The girl apologized, fixed the blanket, and ran out like a scolded woman. The doctor was already slapping his bare feet in the corridor. He rubbed his eyes, adjusted his glasses, and asked fearfully, "Olivia, is there something wrong with Mom? Why did you make a noise there?" The girl cried and began to apologize. "I'm sorry. I only stirred up everyone, but I definitely heard some fussing and banging, like footsteps, so I thought I'd check it out. I thought maybe I was getting sick. I don't know. She scolded me and threw me out. I can't take it anymore. Why does your mother hate me so much? Well, maybe I should leave. I'm just annoying her, and I'm a burden to you, and I'm pregnant." Peter suddenly couldn't help himself and hugged the girl for the first time, not just as a friend, but gently, and began to whisper. "What are you saying?" "Silly girl, I'm so attached to you, I love you. And I don't care that you're pregnant. I'm ready to take the baby and raise it. Olivia, stay, please. Without you, this house was empty and cold. You're the one who brought it to life. And Mom, don't take it out on her. She's a sick person, and that makes her angry. But think what it's like to lie there all day and night staring at the ceiling. I'll talk to her, I promise. Tell me, darling, do you like me even a little bit? I understand I'm 10 years older than you, and not handsome at all, and these stupid glasses." The girl cried even more and whispered, "I love you too, really, and I don't believe my ears. Yes, one can only dream of such a thing. You are the best, most beautiful man. That's why I agreed to look after your mom, because I didn't want to leave you." They sat like that in the kitchen for a long time, hugging, talking about their feelings and making plans for the future. The next morning, Peter went to see his mother first thing. She was already on edge and grumbling. "Good morning, son. It's not a good morning for me, though. I haven't slept all night, and I demand that you kick that impudent woman out. She barged in on me in the middle of the night without permission and woke me up. She was talking rubbish. It's unheard of. Why did you bring her here? I didn't bring her here to take care of my mom. So you're running around with that poor, pregnant woman. You don't give a damn about me. But Peter couldn't take it any longer and started to reprimand his mother. You know, Mom, this is too much. You know very well how much I love you, how much I care about you. I've made you as comfortable as possible. You have an experienced nurse, a carer with you. I'm always trying to make time for you as much as I can. And you're behaving like a capricious, unbearable child. I'm sorry, but I can't go on like this. I'm entitled to my happiness and my private life too. Or don't you think so? Now listen to me, Mom. I love Olivia with all my heart, and I'm ready to have her baby, and we're getting married soon. She's no longer just your carer, but a full member of our family. Please treat her with respect, not harass her at every turn. If you really love me, Mom, accept my choice and try to love Olivia too. Otherwise, we'll have to separate. I can't watch Olivia cry over you every day. The woman realized she'd overreacted. It wasn't the outcome she wanted, and she changed her tone. No, son, not that. I want to be with you always. I'm your mommy. Okay, I promise. I won't hurt Olivia anymore. Go to work. You're going to be late. Mr. Schul hugged his mother. You finally heard me. Thank you, Mommy, for understanding me. It means a lot to me. From that day on, Mrs. Samantha really went quiet. No, she didn't love Olivia, still hated her in her heart. She just tried to ignore her, but she spoke neutrally. She thought feverishly about what she could do to make that fool with the huge belly disappear from the family. The deadline was approaching. Olivia was very nervous. She was already so round and funny. The lovers decided not to celebrate the wedding and just quietly signed to legitimize the relationship. The girl just could not believe that in a week she would become the wife of a respected doctor and the best man in the world. So it all seemed like a fairy tale, but the fairy tale was not destined to become reality. A terrible tragedy fell on poor Olivia's head again. It was an ordinary day, but she had a strange dream, as if William was running towards her on the bridge, waving his arms and shouting something. And suddenly the planks beneath him split, and he falls screaming into the raging river, and the water sucks him in, and Olivia screams and cries. The girl wakes up in a sweat. Her nightgown was clinging to her body, and her heart was racing. She saw William sleeping peacefully next to her and calmed down a little. Slowly she cuddled him and listened to his breathing, his heartbeat, and talked herself into it. It's just a bad dream. It's all right, we'll be married soon. Mrs. Scholl ate breakfast as usual, kissed Olivia on the cheek, stroked her round belly like a watermelon, and left for work. But the girl had not been herself all day, and there was an inexplicable feeling of uneasiness that turned everything inside her upside down. Even Mrs. Samantha quieted down and almost did not bother Olivia. It was evening, and still no Mr. Peter. Olivia began to get nervous. She called the station. They said he was long gone. She couldn't answer her mobile, and it was getting really bad. Then her mobile rang. A policeman said there'd been an accident on the motorway. A drunken daredevil had rammed Peter's car head-on. He miraculously survived, but is in critical condition and intensive care. The phone fell out of Olivia's hands. She screamed. Her legs felt woozy. She struggled to keep from falling. A thought raced through her mind. God, not this. I wish he had lived. Please, please, please don't take away my only favorite and closest person. Tears ran down her cheeks, and it seemed as if her own life was ending at that moment. Olivia pulled herself together and went to the hospital. It turned out that Peter had fallen into a coma. After a complex operation, there was little chance of recovery. Devastated by the news, she drove home and wondered how to tell his mother. She was already paralyzed, but she didn't have to explain anything. Another shock awaited her at home. Olivia could not believe her eyes when she saw her future mother-in-law calmly making coffee in the kitchen and standing on her own feet. The girl couldn't utter a word and stood there with her mouth open. Mrs. Samantha turned and hissed angrily. What are you staring at? I know everything. My son is in a coma, so there's no point in playing on his pity and pretending. A sick man on the bed is a pleasure for everyone. You know how much fun I used to have with everyone fussing over me. So my son took me to his place. He took such good care of me. I love him madly, and I'm not going to share him with anyone. My boy should only be with me, his mummy. I think it's obvious, because no one else will love him like I do. Well, you spoilt all my plans by charming my Peter, and you made such a fool of my boy that he almost did the stupid thing of wanting to marry you. It's all right, he'll be all right. I believe he will. And you disappear forever. Get out of our house, you imposter. You don't want to raise someone else's child. I've already organized your things. Your bags are next to you, so get out. Olivia was shocked. You are a sick, crazy woman. How could you lie and pretend like that? Don't you want your son to be happy? We fell in love, and I'm not leaving him. You know that. God will judge you. Olivia wept and went back to the outskirts to Mrs. Vanessa. She had nowhere else to go. She hadn't visited her for the last month, to her shame. Things had got so twisted, kept putting things off, how to show her face now, shame on her, as it had failed again. Thrown out like a dog, wiped her feet. To her surprise, the house was locked. Olivia knocked, screamed. No one. A neighbor came out and gave her the creeps. What's all the noise? Mrs. Vanessa's gone. She died a fortnight ago. So sudden. We've already given her a neighborly funeral. May she rest in peace. Olivia sat down on the bench and burst into tears. She screamed. But why? Why have I done all this? Forgive me, Mrs. Vanessa, for not being there for him, not even to see him off on his last journey. And the neighbor suddenly understood and asked, You must be the Olivia. Mrs. Vanessa left you something here. She said to give it to you personally if you came here. Then hang on, I'll be right back. The woman ran home and returned with a puffy envelope, handing it to the shocked Olivia. She, right away, opened it and began to read it. It was a will where Mrs. Vanessa had left this house to her, to Olivia. It was also a farewell note. The girl whispered the text with just her lips. Well, sweetheart, I'm leaving. It's my time. I know I feel you'll come to me. Live in my house, I'll be glad. Grow up, my daughter. Somehow I'm sure you'll have a daughter, and remember Mrs. Vanessa with a kind word. Goodbye, Olivia, and be happy. That's when the girl got really hysterical. I mean, how can that happen? A complete stranger took care of her after her death. And the neighbor was surprised, too. She gave Olivia the keys, helped her in and put her on the sofa. Now don't beat yourself up. She didn't suffer. She just laid down for a couple of days. I checked on her. Then I came in the morning and she was cold. She must have died in her sleep. Get some sleep, you're in labor. You mustn't be nervous. You're not like a distant relative, are you? Since Mrs. Vanessa gave you the house. Almost a granddaughter, Olivia whispered with just her lips. The girl began to settle in. She went to Mrs. Vanessa's grave and swore she would never forget her kindness. And as soon as she had money, she would build a monument to the old one. She also began to sort out her grandmother's things, to put them in order. She got to the old pantry. There were some old chests gathering dust. Olivia began to put out all sorts of things, a colorful sundress, heeled shoes, a silk lace handkerchief. Apparently these were Mrs. Vanessa's outfits when she was young. At the very bottom lay a small box. The girl opened it and aghast. There lay 3 incredibly beautiful brooches. They shimmered and were obviously not simple and cheap. Olivia remembered all the stories her grandmother had told her about family jewelry, so it was true. The poor old lady had saved them even when she herself was surviving penniless in her old age. And then there was a stack of letters, neatly tied with a red ribbon. For Olivia, this valuable find was a lifesaver. Olivia sold the 2 brooches for a decent amount of money. Now she could not worry about the future and the fact that she and the baby would be poor. The girl bought a cot, a pram, nappies, overalls, a bonnet, and a discharge envelope. She left the rest for life. Most importantly, she ordered a beautiful memorial for Mrs. Vanessa. Her grandmother deserved it. It was time for the letters. Olivia carefully opened the envelope and began to read the lovingly written lines. Hello, Alex. How are you? Why aren't you answering? I'm fine. I'm working. I have my own money now. I help my mom with everything. I don't have much to eat, but we manage somehow. I miss you very much. My darling, at least leave me a message. There were many such letters. Mrs. Vanessa must have been very much in love with some boy in her youth. It was like Olivia was living her emotions and experiences. But why were these letters never sent? She found the answer in the last letter. Forgive me, my love, if you can. My parents are forcing me to marry Tom and I don't love him at all. I love you. My heart yearns for you. I long for you. Why haven't you ever written to me? Maybe you found someone else in a foreign land. I guess our love is over. But Mom doesn't know the main thing. I'm pregnant with your child. We're to have a baby. Answer me before it's too late, I beg you. That's what happened. So Mrs. Vanessa waited for the fiance she was pregnant with and wrote letters to him. And her mother intercepted them and didn't send them. They never reached their destination. That's who she got an abortion from. She said once that she had sins that when she was young. So that's why there were no more children. That's why she spoke so little about her husband. She must have had a hard time living with someone she didn't love. Olivia even cried. That's how it happens. The closest people so ruin the lives of their children. She was determined to find Alex and give him the correspondence. It didn't matter who he was or how his life had turned out. So Mrs. Vanessa wanted him to read them. She treasured them all her life. It was only a short time before the birth. Olivia had been visiting William in the hospital all this time. She read him books, stroked his arm, and kept saying, my darling, come back to your senses soon. Come back to me, I long for you, I feel so bad. I need you. As soon as Mrs. Samantha entered the room, Olivia would leave. She didn't want to make a scene. The women just exchanged murderous glances. They were like lightning bolts. The birth didn't take her by surprise. Olivia had everything ready to go, bag on the doorstep. So as soon as the contractions started, she called an ambulance herself and waited. Surprisingly, the woman wasn't afraid of labor and pain at all. She just prayed that William would survive. She couldn't imagine her future without him. The labor was hard and exhausting, but everything went well, and a baby girl was born. Olivia named her Valerie, without even thinking about it. No one came to see her at her discharge either. Olivia, swallowing her tears, traveled home alone with the baby in a taxi. And the next day she went to the hospital with her daughter. She took William's hand again. Tears rolled down my cheeks. That makes two of us. Darling, I named my daughter Valerie, but I can't live without you. Please, open your eyes and look at me. I'm waiting for you. Then the baby cried loudly. Suddenly, William's finger twitched and his eyelids fluttered. Everything on the equipment flashed and beeped. Olivia immediately ran out to get the medics. Her heart was racing. She screamed across the corridor. Help, my husband's awake. The doctor checked everything. He was amazed. It's a miracle. I checked everything a while ago. There were no dynamics at all. And here it is. Well, now the worst is over. I understand your task. Here's the text edited to your specifications. I congratulate you, but it's a long rehabilitation, you know, said the doctor. As soon as Mr. Peter Schull came to, he and Olivia cried, hugged, and talked for a long time. She told him all about his mother's supposed disability, about her kicking her out, and about the inheritance. The man couldn't believe his own mom could do that to him. He promised. Be patient a little longer, sweetheart. I'll get back on my feet and everything will be fine. I'll send Mom home and we'll live together. I'll be a better husband and father. You know, I could hear you reading books to me, talking to me. I just couldn't wake up. Thank you for being there for me all this time, for overcoming all the difficulties, for not breaking down. Mrs. Samantha also came to see her son. As soon as she heard that he had recovered, she exclaimed, My son, at last. You're getting better, I'm so glad. I have wonderful news. Imagine I'm back on my feet. It's a miracle. Mr. Peter decided to play along and asked, That's wonderful. Where's Olivia? How is she? I hope she's waiting for me at home. Mrs. Samantha was lying. She's gone. The girl took off right away. Said she didn't want an invalid husband. And I told you she was a bitch. But you didn't believe me. Well, she's gone now. I'm here. And we'll be together again. Yes, son, no one will love you like I do. What do you need those women for? They're just evil. Mr. Peter couldn't take it any longer, and he fought with his fists clenched. Will you stop lying? Mom, do you really want me to be with you all my life? Why? Why? I'm a living person and I also want to have my own family, raise children. And you're ruining my life. You were happy when I split up with my first wife. You kicked Olivia out and you abused her. You're making my life miserable. Don't you realize that? You made up some horrible disease to tie me down. This is insane. Mrs. Samantha tried again, wringing her hands in pity. Peter, my son, how can you do this to your mom? Don't scream. My blood pressure is going to go up. I'm the one who got you back on your feet. I sacrificed myself, my love life. And this is how you treat me. Ungrateful. Mr. Peter replied firmly. You know what, Mom? Stop being a comedian. I know everything. Olivia visited me all the time, and I heard her voice, and she came to me first with the baby. I woke up when she was crying. Olivia and I love each other, like it or not, and we're getting married soon. I'm going to put the girl in my name and give her my last name. You go home and stay out of my life ever again. Mrs. Samantha's on a roll, too. Oh, that's how it is. Well, I'll leave tonight. Do whatever you want. Unscrupulous, ungrateful. He traded his mother for some beggar. I don't have a son anymore. Just know it. The two of them had a big fight. And Mrs. Samantha left in a hurry. She cursed Olivia in every possible way and thought that this was the reason why her son had become rude to her. The man got better, and after 2 months he was walking. He was discharged and immediately took Olivia and the baby back to his home. Surprisingly, the little girl immediately reached out to Mr. Peter and fell asleep in his arms. And as she grew older, she began to say "Daddy" with confidence. Olivia turned out to be a great hostess. She managed to manage her daughter, cook dinner, and clean up. She kept thanking fate that Peter was her doctor, because he had become her destiny and changed her life. All this time, Olivia never gave up trying to find Alex Brown. It was important to her to give the letters to Mrs. Vanessa. She couldn't bear to throw them away. She and her husband had contacted the police and acquaintances. But how many Browns are there in the capital? And there's no way he lives here. Maybe he never came back. There's hardly any information on this man either, so there was no chance of finding him. So Peter and Olivia decided to turn to a TV program about finding people. They sent everything they knew and waited. They were under no illusions, but a few months later they got a call. It turned out that the same Alex Brown was also looking for Mrs. Vanessa Wilson. So that's it. Olivia got the coordinates. It was a private boarding house for the elderly in the north of the country. The girl consulted with her husband and decided to go. She entered the ward. On the bed sat a frail old man trying to eat soup. His hands were shaking, and he could hardly bring the spoon to his mouth. Olivia coughed. "Good afternoon, Mr. Alex Brown. My name is Olivia. I was told you were looking for Mrs. Vanessa Wilson. I knew her very well. I need to give you something from her. That's why I'm here." The old man brightened up. His eyes, faded with age, suddenly lit up. He began to gabble. "Hello, young lady. Come in, sit down. Do you really know Vanessa? Isn't everything for nothing? Where does she live now? I'd give anything in the world to see her. If you only knew how much love we had." Olivia sighed, wiped away her tears, and replied, "Unfortunately, Mrs. Vanessa is dead, and it will not be possible to see her. But I found her letters addressed to you, and they were never sent. I couldn't throw them away, so I thought I'd do my best to find you and give them to her. If she kept them all her life, you must have been very dear to her too. Here, take it." So the old man put on his glasses and opened the letter. He eagerly reread each line. Tears dripped from his eyes and prevented him from reading. Every now and then he took off his glasses, wiped them and muttered something quietly, kissed those yellowed sheets of paper as if they were of the greatest value. And when he read the last one, he clutched his heart and began to sigh. Olivia was frightened, poured water from the decanter on the nightstand. "Alex, are you all right? Would you like some water?" The old man kept whispering. "I'm late. How could I be late? I could have had kids with Vanessa. My whole life could have gone differently. It's all my fault, you idiot. I was such a young idiot. I ruined my life and hers with my jealousy and pride." Olivia waited patiently for him to come to his senses, and then asked timidly, What happened between you two anyway? I have not known Mrs. Vanessa long, but I have loved her with all my heart, and I'd like to know everything. Would you mind sharing? Alex sighed heavily, closed his eyes as if he were traveling back in time, and began to speak. Olivia felt goosebumps run up and down her body. Vanessa and I have lived next door to each other since we were kids. We were children during the war, but then the whole country rebuilt our homeland. Those were hard times. We lived with little food. Clothes too, just to keep warm. Our mothers worked hard without fathers. They were hardly ever home. But Vanessa and I were left to our own devices. I always looked after her like a little sister, took pity on her. An extra piece of bread or a bun. And when I graduated high school, it was like the first time I saw my best friend, I fell in love. If you knew how beautiful Vanessa was, Olivia, her mom made her a dress out of bright red material. It was amazing. My heart was pounding and my throat was dry. I never took a step away from her. And then I couldn't stand it and confessed my love. She was happy too. That's when we kissed for the first time. Anyway, we were so in love. She and I made plans to go far away together, to get married, to have children. But I was taken away to the army. I served in the South, traveled far away. And I wrote such letters, waiting to hear from her. She never replied. After the army, I went to my old address, and they told me that my Vanessa had married and left. That's all love is. So I got married in a hurry out of spite. But it wasn't for love. I raised a son, but I didn't get along well with my wife. We were strangers. In the end, we divorced. And my son took me here in my old age, saying, "You'll be better off here, Dad." And I'm so offended. I did everything for him. I gave an education, a flat, and spared no time. But there was no place for me in his house. I've become a burden to my child. It's so scary. I've been here in San Diego for a year now, and I'm bored. So I thought I'd try looking for Olivia. I've carried her memory with me all my life. I've never loved anyone else so much. I thought maybe I'd see her again in my old age. I wanted to hug her and tell her I still loved her. So thank you for coming, for bringing the letters. Can I have them? I'll read them every day and remember my beloved. I don't have much time left anyway. I can't stand it in these walls. It's a humiliation. My son only pays for my stay. He doesn't show his face. When I call, he says he's busy and hangs up on me. So that's it. Olivia shook her head. She felt so sorry for Alex Brown. She began to comfort him. Yes, it's a story. Mrs. Vanessa loved you very much too, I'm sure. But apparently her mother decided otherwise and married her daughter to someone else. But your letters never reached you. I'll tell you what. Can I come and visit you? May I? It would be my pleasure. Mrs. Vanessa's the closest person I've ever known, even though we're not related. She gave me a helping hand when I was on the brink, alone in the capital with no money and pregnant. She became like my own grandmother. We lived soul to soul. So you're not a stranger to me either. Alex was as excited as a child. But of course, come. I'd be delighted. I'm so bored here. Thank you again, Olivia. I can see you're a good, kind man. I wish my son were like that. Where and when did I miss him so much? Olivia came home sad and thoughtful and told her husband everything. She felt so sorry for her grandfather. She begged him. "William, my darling, let's get Alex out of there. He's not well. You see, I owe Mrs. Vanessa a great deal. I wasn't there for her when she died. That woman left me a house jewelry. So can't I help the person she loved so much? I'm sure she would have been so pleased." William was a little shocked. He had his doubts. "Olivia, this is a very serious decision. Are you sure you've weighed everything? We have a family. My daughter is still very young, and there's another member of the family coming. Can we all get along? We're not even related." William's seen what's been going on with his wife for a couple of days. He's been thinking, weighing things up, and then he makes a suggestion. "You're right, Olivia. We can't leave it like this. It's not good for a good man to be lost in a boarding house. It's better with a family. We'll leave him with our Emma. They'll become friends and she'll cheer anyone up. We'll go and get Alex Brown. We'll all get used to it." Olivia threw herself around her husband's neck and kissed him and whispered, "Thank you. You're the best. You're the only one who understands what I'm going through." Alex Brown couldn't believe it. How could it be? A stranger's family wants to invite him to live with them. Chuon's own son gave him up as a worthless thing. The man did not hesitate for a long time and agreed. It was unbearable to be in these walls, although he was very worried. And what if communication does not work out? Suddenly he and here will interfere with everyone. What then? They'd throw him out again like a dog. Then it would be better to die. But his fears were in vain. The Schull family was very nice to him. He was surrounded by care and attention. And when Olivia brought him to Mrs. Vanessa's house, Alex had grown attached to the place. He kept looking at her portrait on the wall, going through the things his beloved had touched. It made his heart ache. Olivia took the older man to Mrs. Vanessa's grave. She went to the side. She realized Alex had a lot to say to his beloved woman. Indeed, the man felt better afterwards. It was as if he said goodbye to Vanessa and let her go. Everyone lived amicably. Alex was happy to take care of the baby. He liked to rock her on his lap and tell her old fairy tales. And the little girl called him grandfather. And he felt so warm inside. No one scolded him for the crumbs under the table or for his mistakes, and Olivia's husband did not look at him with squeamishness as if he were his own son. On the contrary, Olivia took such good care of him. She gave him his medicine on time, offered him warm socks, knowing that all old people were cold. He was not an outcast. On the contrary, he became a part of this friendly family, and he was so grateful to the people who sheltered him in his old age. The rumor that Dr. Schull's family had taken in some strange old man from a boarding house and was taking care of him quickly spread around the area. An acquaintance rushed to share it with Mrs. Samantha. "Samantha, do you realize what your William has done? He's taken some grandfather out of a boarding house, so he didn't want to live with you. He gave up his own mother, and now he's taking care of someone else's. What a mess. How can that be? Do you want me to call him and tell him? Actually, you're lonely too. They don't even look at you. You need help cleaning and buying medicine. Shameless." Mrs. Samantha suddenly angry. "Don't you dare call him, Linda. It's none of your business. This is our family, and we'll sort it out ourselves." She threw the phone in her heart, fell into a chair, and cried bitterly. A whole year had passed since her quarrel with her son and her hasty departure. She and William had never reconciled. The son only called once a month, asked about her health, and transferred money to the card. But he still didn't want to see her. And of course, acquaintances passed on that he lives with this Olivia amicably, that daughter madly loves and soul in it does not dote. And now they've taken care of some grandfather. Who's that, I wonder? Could it be Olivia's family? She'd been alone all this time. She wasn't happy in her comfortable flat anymore. It was like a four-walled box was crushing her. She didn't want to fight anymore, to poison her son's life, and to make sure that he was with her. She'd made William very angry. That's for sure. And she's abused that wretched girl for nothing. And she stood up to it, you see. A good wife and mother. What Mrs. Samantha wanted more than anything in the world was to visit her son like she used to hold him in her arms. I'd like to meet the baby and take her home with me. That would be nice and not boring. But how to find the strength to overcome pride and resentment and still make the first step towards reconciliation? Turns out it's so hard. Peter told Olivia on the eve of his mother's birthday, "Honey, it's Mum's birthday tomorrow. It's her anniversary. Let's take a chance, invite her over. Let's see how it goes. I feel so bad that we're barely speaking to her. I hope she understands everything and will make up." My wife nodded understandingly. She had thought about it many times herself. "You're right. Call your mum, invite her to visit. And there we'll see." Tomorrow is her birthday. Mrs. Samantha was in a worse mood than ever. So what? She'd fallen out with the people closest to her. She didn't want to call her neighbor and complain about her life. She'd have to live alone. And then the phone rang. When Mrs. Samantha heard her son, a smile appeared on her face, and even the wrinkles seemed to have smoothed out. He began hesitantly. "Mom, hi, it's your anniversary tomorrow. You shouldn't miss it. I'll pick you up at 5. We invite you to our place. We'll have a family dinner. But I'm asking you very much, let's not be jealous or scandalous. I'm so happy with Olivia. I love Emma like my own. Just accept that and be happy for us." Mrs. Samantha swallowed back tears and promised. "Hi, son. I'm so happy. Don't worry. I've learned a lot this year and I won't make the same mistakes. Tell me, how old is your daughter? I have to prepare myself. I can't go to the baby's house empty-handed." Mrs. Samantha remembered it as her happiest birthday. She received such a warm welcome. She was given a huge bouquet of her favorite gladioluses and a tablet so that she could read e-books on a big screen, look at photos, and correspond without glasses. Getting to know the baby girl went great too. The baby immediately smiled at the stranger, held out her arms and mouthed Baba. Olivia laughed and replied, "Yes, sweetie, this is Grandma Samantha. Look what she brought you." To Mrs. Samantha admired this little angel with blue eyes and such sweet cheeks. She understood her son. It was impossible not to love such a marvelous baby. And they had a heart-to-heart talk, as if the old offenses and quarrels had never happened. To Mrs. Samantha also quickly found a common language with Alex. They agreed to walk together in the park and be friends. And they had a lot to talk about, as they had a long and complicated life behind them. Mrs. Samantha raised her champagne glass and made a toast. "My dear, dear family, I want to apologize to you all for my inappropriate behavior. My love for my son was so all-consuming, even painful. I could not accept the fact that he could also love someone else but me. And I tortured all of you, I know. And I'm ashamed. It wasn't until I was alone that I rethought it all. After all, if you love someone close to you, you should be happy, that he is well, and not be selfish. I look at you now and realize how wrong I was. Peter, my son, you are a great man for creating such a strong and happy family, despite my intrigues. I hope I can be a part of it again." Peter jumped up from his seat, walked over and hugged his mum tightly, whispering, "Happy birthday, Mummy. I'm so glad we've made up." Both of them felt at ease. The whole family was together now. A widow with many children was weeping bitterly at her husband's grave, and as soon as her shoulder was touched. For 4 years, Joyce had not believed in happiness. Once she had everything a woman could wish for a loving husband, Albert. 3 wonderful children, a beautiful flat in the center, exotic trips once a year with the whole family to the end of the world, an expensive car. But everything changed dramatically when Albert died. The man was coming home late at night. A meeting had gone long. At work, he never particularly did not spare himself, realizing that a large family must be decently provided for. The job took up a lot of his time, but even with his busy schedule, he found days that he could devote to Joyce and the kids. That unfortunate night, Albert sat behind the wheel very tired. Their company was preparing for an important project, so the man hadn't slept much in the last few days. The road was empty, so at some point Albert relaxed and apparently lost his guard. He simply did not notice the impending danger. At the junction, a lorry slammed into him at full speed. There was no chance of survival. Looking at the traffic camera footage, Joyce realized that if Albert had slowed down for even a fraction of a second before the junction, the terrible tragedy would have been avoided. Inattention and fatigue were to blame, as well as the lorry driver who had arrogantly hoped to run through the junction on red. There's no point in blaming anyone now. Albert can't be brought back. It took Joyce a long time to accept what had happened when she received a call from the police. The woman was convinced that she had been the victim of a prank or fraudsters who swindled gullible relatives out of money by reporting trouble with family members. But something in the caller's tone alerted her. Senior Lieutenant Morris, as the man had introduced himself, was waiting for her at the district morgue. It took Joyce 10 minutes to get there, almost getting into an accident on the way. She entered the building on woozy legs. "This is crazy," the woman told herself. "This is a mistake. Albert's at work, he just got held up." And the fact that the phone was silent was just to keep her busy. Joyce, a man's voice called out to her. Turning round, Joyce saw a young boy standing in front of her. If he hadn't unfolded the law enforcement badge, she would never have believed he was an officer. Joyce, Senior Lieutenant Morris continued. "My name is Ethan. You and I have been chatting on the phone." Yes, Joyce responded uncertainly. "Where is he? Ethan, can I see him?" Perhaps that's not the best idea, the young man replied, somehow embarrassed. You see, the accident is terrible. There's hardly anything left of the car. And your husband. I've called you in now, rather to identify your personal belongings. I don't think it's wise to identify a body in your condition. Everything inside clenched. Joyce didn't understand how anyone could speak so callously about her husband. She still held out hope that someone else had died. There weren't many other Albertans in their big city. The policeman led the woman into a small room. Another young man sat at a desk, concentrating on typing something into his phone. Kyle Morris addressed him. Get the evidence bag. Kyle lazily pulled open a desk drawer and extracted a clear plastic bag containing some red-stained items. Here, Joyce, take a look at this. Ethan began laying the contents out on the table. Do you recognize any of these items? She was about to declare, without looking, that this was the first time she'd ever seen any of this. But then the gold pendant she'd given her husband on their wedding anniversary caught her eye. The woman reached for the shiny rectangle, but her legs gave out. Ethan managed to pull up a chair for her. Everything in front of Joyce's eyes swam. She drank the water offered by the policeman. Yes, those are my husband's things, the woman spoke in a trembling voice. We need to make our way to the station now, fill out paperwork and watch the security footage, Morris addressed her. Joyce didn't care anymore. Her whole world had collapsed overnight. What did she care about paperwork? She had fallen into a kind of half-remembered oblivion and reacted to the words of the staff, clutching Albert's pendant tightly in her hand. All she cared about now was how to tell her children that their daddy was gone. After the funeral, Joyce had stopped caring about what was going on around her. The children were looked after by a nanny, and Joyce herself began to drink in secret. To the housekeeper's criticism of her constant pulling of bottles out of the bin, the woman did not react. She locked herself in her room and spent long hours looking at pictures of their once happy family. This went on for months. Waking up on a frosty winter morning with a severe headache, Joyce felt as if she had woken up. She looked around at the mess around her and cried. Only now did she finally realize that Albert would never again come into their bedroom, hug her, or call her to eat the cheesecakes he always made for the family on weekends. When the woman left the room, the first thing she did was head to the kitchen. Everyone in the house was still asleep. The clock showed only the beginning of 7. Joyce was determined to prepare her husband's speciality. Her relaxed body didn't obey her. It was only on the 3rd attempt that she managed to knead the dough. When the last cheesecake was transferred from the pan to the plate, Catherine came into the kitchen. Her eldest daughter was 8, but she was remarkably advanced for her age. "Mummy?" The little girl wondered. "Are you up already?" "Yes," Catherine, the woman, tried to smile and hugged her daughter tightly. "I wasn't feeling well, but I'm fine now." "You made Daddy's cheesecakes," Catherine wondered. Of all the children, she was the only one to realize that her father was gone. James, who was only 5, cried for a long time, but he couldn't understand what was happening. Elizabeth was just a baby, unable to comprehend such information. "Mummy, are we going to have things back to normal now?" Catherine asked hopefully. "Yes, Catherine," Joyce sighed heavily. "It won't be the same. But we're strong, aren't we? We'll try to manage somehow." Catherine sat looking at her mother with a confused look. The girl could hardly believe her words. The woman had lost a lot of weight. Always neat, stylish hair turned into some kind of crow's nest. Under the eyes, darkened horrible circles. Her hands were treacherously shaking. "You know what?" Joyce suddenly suggested. "Why don't we have a beauty day this morning? Just the 2 of us." They used to have this kind of entertainment regularly, having been the first in the family. Catherine had everything a little girl could want. Therefore, hearing her mother's proposal, the daughter, without hesitation, agreed. While they were talking, James and Elizabeth entered the kitchen, accompanied by Cassandra and the Harrison family's invariable nanny. His brother held the little girl's hand with care, leading her like a princess. "Mammy," the little one shouted with glee as they embraced her. They were used to seeing their mother in the kitchen in the mornings. Joyce rarely left the room, trying not to let the children notice her condition. "My good ones." Joyce smiled as she hugged the little ones. "Good morning, Cassandra." "Good morning. I see you're in a good mood today," Cassandra replied gently. There was relief in the woman's eyes. She had been worried about Joyce lately. She had been working for the family for 8 years now. In that time, she had grown accustomed to everyone as family. With Albert's death, everything had changed. But watching Joyce fade away was unbearable. Cassandra had moved in willingly to help out and take on some of the responsibilities of a hostess. "Aunt Cassandra," Catherine said to Nanny, "Mummy and I are having a beauty day today." "Oh, you don't say, my dear. It's about time. It's better than being cooped up in 4 walls." After breakfast, Joyce and Catherine went on their beauty expedition, as they called their visit to the salon. Joyce was quickly tidied up and Catherine had her charming braids braided. However, there was a hitch at reception. "Ladies, the payment didn't go through," said the receptionist, smiling guiltily. "Let's try again. It happens sometimes." When the payment failed several more times, Joyce became seriously worried. Taking cash out of her purse, the woman paid. Getting into her car, she called the bank and reported her problem. Joyce, the employee, answered politely, "You see, the account to which your card is linked has been frozen. I can't give you the details over the phone. Come to the office." Joyce and Albert shared an account. The woman never gave much thought to how much money was in there, knowing her husband made a very good living. The message about the freeze left her confused. Of course, it's some kind of technical glitch, the woman convinced herself. Now I will go to the bank and find out everything. But the bank said nothing comforting. On the contrary, the situation seemed much worse. The account was arrested and blocked. Albert had some debts that Joyce had no idea about. They never had any secrets from each other, the manager said monotonously. Even if you inherit now, you can't unfreeze the account. By law, debts are inherited too. So what's left? Either sue, trying to recover the money, or accept it. Neither of which Joyce was happy with. Suddenly fear came to her throat. What is this? The woman thought with horror. There's no money. What am I supposed to do now? Joyce had never worked, having been fortunate enough to marry a wealthy and promising man. A student, Joyce initially worked part-time as a translator, dreaming of a career as an international translator. But her husband was adamant. I am capable of providing for you so that you will not deny yourself anything for the rest of your life. Joyce never went to work, and then Catherine appeared, and the woman devoted herself entirely to her family. Joyce grinned. For the rest of her days. Who knew how things would turn out? Right now, the woman was concerned about the children. Of course, there was some cash at home, and the jewelry could be sold. Enough for the first time, but money was running out at supersonic speed. Used to living large, Joyce didn't know where her finances were going. At some point, she suddenly realized that she had run out of money altogether. The jewelry had been sold. The contents of her husband's safe were rapidly melting away. There was nothing to do, so she went to Cassandra for advice. Cassandra, the woman, began softly, stepping noiselessly into the kitchen, where the nanny was preparing something. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Joyce, why are you so frightened?" The lady standing at the cooker literally jumped up and down. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Joyce tried to justify herself. "I've got something to talk to you about." "Yes," the nanny said, wiping her hands on her apron and sitting down at the table. Joyce didn't know where to begin. But there was no one closer than Cassandra right now. She was the only person Joyce could talk to normally. "Cassandra, I don't have any more money on me," she began. "What do you mean, Joyce?" And the woman looked at her understandingly. "What do you mean you don't have any?" "I always thought Albert was earning enough to give your grandchildren a good old age." He did. Joyce sighed. But he had some debts. Huge debts. "I've been to the bank and all the accounts are blocked. I've been spending the cash in the safe for 2 months now. I've sold most of my jewelry." "Joyce, are you serious now?" Cassandra exclaimed as if she couldn't believe it. "Why didn't you tell me before? It's not a minor problem. You have children." It was embarrassing. Joyce excused herself. "I've never been very good at counting money. It was Albert's job. He never let me in on things. Turns out money does run out. I don't know what to do now." You have to get a job before it's too late, Nanny said firmly. A job? I've never had a job, Joyce replied. You know, I got married straight out of college. Albert wouldn't let me earn my own money. Well, you have a good specialty, Cassandra said. There's always a need for translators. Cassandra didn't give up. Where would they take me? I graduated 10 years ago. No experience, nothing. Joyce disagreed. It's okay, the nanny continued. Work on the internet. I think translations are always in demand. Anyway, you never know without trying. That's true, Joyce sighed. Do you think it pays all right? It's all right, it's not all right. It's enough to live on. You'll have to tighten your belts, of course, but it's up to you, you know. I won't leave you in the lurch, but it's time you got things under control. Hello, Martin. Joyce was visibly agitated as she dialed the number of her husband's friend and companion. This is Joyce Harrison, she introduced herself. Joyce, hello. Where have you been? The man was very surprised. I rang. You didn't answer the phone. I haven't seen you since the funeral. Well, you know, I was in such a state I didn't want to see anyone. Joyce sighed heavily. Martin, I need to talk to you. It's a serious problem. I think you can help me. No problem, Martin answered in a confident tone, giving Joyce hope. Half an hour later, Martin was in the flat. It had been 6 months since he had visited his friends. Without Albert here, everything seemed somehow alien. The men had been friends since high school. They'd been through a lot. They opened their own business, shared both profits and losses. After the wedding, Albert was a little distant, but Martin did not take offense. He understood everything. He had no family of his own. His personal life was replaced by his favorite job. Joint business did not connect them for a long time. He accumulated capital. Albert went on a solo voyage, engaged in real estate, and Martin remained a small businessman. But doing what he loved, it didn't affect their friendship. What happened to you? The man asked. Martin, Joyce began. Tell me, did you know anything about Albert's business? What do you mean? Well, I was at the solicitor's yesterday. I'm about to inherit the estate. It's been 6 months. I've got to make it official, Joyce suddenly stammered. And Martin didn't quite understand what she was getting at, or what it was about the inheritance. What's the next step? Isn't it a joy to get millions and not know where to put it? So she turned to an old friend for help. Joyce continued. No, Joyce said in a tone that alerted Martin. You see, Albert had huge debts. He never said anything to me about it. So I was wondering if you knew anything. They showed me some papers, some loans, some private loans, some receipts. And now I've got to pay it all back, you know. What are you talking about? Martin was genuinely surprised. What debts? I always thought that you were doing very well. I was jealous, to be honest. So? It's a lot of money. Astronomical. I don't understand it myself. I thought he was making good money. I spoke to Jack, his assistant, well, he told me that Albert had been really looking to expand lately. He's probably got the money to do it. I just can't understand why he didn't do it on behalf of the company. I take it you're worried, Martin said, and how much is there to pay? A lot to pay out, Joyce sighed. They blocked all the accounts, but I'm still short. I think I'm going to have to sell the flat. Really? Martin was genuinely surprised. The sum seemed to be really impressive. In his estimation, the Harrison flat was worth a lot. Center, prestigious building, huge space, designer finishes. Joyce had told him how much he needed to pay off his debts. Martin even whistled in surprise. Tell me, will you help me with the deal? Joyce asked. I don't know anything about this sort of thing. I'm afraid of running into crooks and losing the price. No problem, Joyce said persuasively. Tell me, where are you going to live? Maybe a cheaper option. I realize you're used to luxury, but you don't have much choice now. As they say, it's not a matter of living large, it's a matter of living well. Of course, Martin, I've had to say goodbye to luxury, Joyce agreed. And it would be nice to have enough for a 2-bedroom in the suburbs. There are 4 of us, after all, but there's no need to consider a decent one. I understand, Martin nodded. I'll try to find suitable options. All right, I'll get started right away so it won't take too long. Let me take a picture of the flat. I've got a good realtor in the neighborhood. He won't let you down. Mammy James interjected, "Where's my room?" "This is where you and Catherine will live." Joyce opened the door to the tiny bedroom. "We'll put the beds here, and there's a table and a wardrobe." "No, I don't want to live with Catherine. She's mean and greedy. I want my room back." The little boy whimpered. "Honey, we're going to live here now. Don't you love it? Look how green the yard is. You'll even have your own tree." By your own tree, Joyce meant a huge cherry tree, whose branches were literally breaking through the window of the future nursery. "And Elizabeth?" James persisted. "Elizabeth will live with me. There's plenty of room for us." Trying to smile, Joyce answered her son. Catherine entered the room. The girl's face showed that she was not happy about her new home either. "Mama," she began, "tell me, are we poor now?" "What are you saying?" Joyce tried to evade, though she knew it was useless to deceive her daughter. "Well," Catherine looked at her seriously, "the whole flat is smaller than our kitchen. And we drove an hour to get here. Why are we moving?" "Mummy, I'm not stupid. Just tell it like it is." Joyce took her daughter aside. She didn't want James to get hysterical when he caught some of the phrases. "Daughter," she began, "I don't want to deceive you. You're right, we don't have any more money. It's just the way things are. But now we have to learn to live again. I had to sell the flat. A lot of things will change. But the important thing is to stay together. Isn't it?" Joyce looked hopefully at her daughter. The girl's mind was going through an intense process. She seemed to be relating what she had heard to everything that had happened lately. For a moment, her eyes lit up. "Aunt Cassandra isn't coming back, is she?" Catherine asked disappointedly. "If we don't have any more money, we won't be able to pay her." "Catherine," Joyce hastened to reassure her. "Cassandra won't leave us. We're like family to her. It's just that we will see her less often because she will have to work somewhere else. But she'll be happy to come round at weekends, won't she?" "Who's going to look after Elizabeth and James then, whilst at school?" the girl asked. "Well, I'm working at home for the time being, and then I'm thinking of putting them in kindergarten," her mother said with sincere faith in her voice. "And you yourself are ready to move to a new school?" continued questioning Catherine. "Mummy, I understand everything. I'm already quite big," she said in a serious tone. "What does it matter where to study? I can think for myself." Sometimes Joyce was amazed at how mature her daughter was. They couldn't afford the old grammar school. Thank goodness they had managed to get the child into a neighborhood school, which was really quite good. But still, it is a stress for the girl, accustomed to classmates and individual approach of teachers. And with kindergarten for the younger ones, it was necessary to solve something. It turned out that it was not enough just to bring the children. The queue was huge, and Joyce could not afford a private institution. The cost of attendance seemed exorbitant. And then there were the two children. Cassandra's services, of course, had to be dispensed with as well. The kind woman had agreed to help with the household chores, but Joyce felt she had no right to exploit her all the time. She managed to find some work, but translations from French were of little interest now. Everywhere there was a need for specialists in Asian languages, of which the former student had only a vague idea. Anything she could earn was gone in a flash. The money left after paying all Albert's debts was barely enough for a small flat in a residential area and a small reserve, which Joyce put aside for the last resort. There was still a car, but a woman with 3 children didn't want to deprive herself of mobility, although the maintenance of a premium car also cost a lot of money. Attempts to get an official job as an interpreter in an international company failed. Seeing a spectacular, well-dressed woman, job seekers managers willingly escorted her to their offices, but her lack of experience and 3 children immediately turned them against Joyce. After a few such interviews, she gave up trying. Such conversations hurt her ego. So, and remained, in his opinion, forced to work part-time casual translations of modern French authors. The editor was in no hurry to pile orders, so the cash flow in the family did not turn into a stormy river. 6 months after the move, Joyce realized that the money is catastrophically lacking. She still had to sell the car, exchanging it for a simpler car. The school Catherine went to, although it was not elite, still required huge expenses. They were constantly collecting money for repairs, for gifts for teachers, for something else. The last thing Joyce wanted was for her classmates and teachers to be prejudiced against Catherine because of her family's difficult financial situation, so she paid all the exorbitant fees. That's the way it is in all schools, Judy, an old friend who was one of the few people Joyce kept in touch with after her husband Albert's death, once said. The rest of her friends had evaporated as soon as they felt there were no benefits to be gained from their relationship with Albert. And the widow might ask the widow for a loan. No one was in any hurry to part with the money. Joyce was a proud person, but nobody cared much about that aspect. So she was left with her university friend Judy, Martin, and Cassandra. They supported the single mom as best they could. But in today's world, it's hard enough to stay afloat without a financial backstop. You know what, Joyce? Judy continued. I've got an acquaintance who's opening a private kindergarten with some experimental methods of education. Not many clients yet, as the prices aren't too steep. Maybe I could put in a good word with her about your kids. She is a person who understands, responsive, and in trouble will not abandon. I think we can negotiate a discount. You still have to find a job, no matter what. With the kids at home, it's out of the question. That's true, Joyce thought. But I doubt if I can afford even a small amount of money. Please leave that to me, said Judy. I'll arrange it. We'll make it all right. I can't help you with the job, unfortunately. You know I'm not very good at it myself. Just as Judy had said, the owner of the daycare center had come to an agreeable arrangement. Joyce was relieved to trust the children to this woman, who, as it turned out, lived nearby and even offered to bring them home. Joyce immediately started looking for a job, hoping for some prestigious, high-paying position. It didn't work out. First, she got a job as an administrator in a beauty parlor, but she couldn't work there for a month. The relationship with the owner, who for some reason immediately disliked the newcomer, did not work out. Joyce did not have any working specialty, although there were a lot of similar vacancies, and the salary was promised to be good. There were still options, which the woman was prevented from considering by her pride. But could a person with a higher education go as a cashier or food packer in a supermarket? Joyce tried delivery, so popular with the younger generation, but after a few orders brought to her old acquaintance, she gave up the idea. And it was costing a lot of money in petrol. Joyce, let's go to my office, as a manager Martin once suggested to her when he dropped in for tea. We've got a girl going on maternity leave. I wouldn't want to bring in someone from outside. It's not a difficult job. Of course, I can't offer you a huge salary, but a full social package. Weekends like normal people, free meals. Sure, I'll go, Joyce agreed without hesitation. That's how she joined Martin's firm. Things were not going well at the new place. No, the woman coped with her duties in full. But relations with her coworkers had been frayed from day one. All the women working for Martin were convinced that Joyce got her position because of the chief's favor. Some ladies were openly jealous of her striking appearance and were quick to invent another unflattering gossip about her private life. But Joyce paid no attention. All she was interested in was how to feed herself and her children. Besides, her job left her enough time to do translations. However, the woman had no weekends at all. Even joint walks with the kids remained only a dream. Thank God, Cassandra came to the rescue, helping to make ends meet. Joyce had learned to live without her husband. Mummy, Catherine said from the doorway when she saw Joyce staring at her laptop. I don't think you've forgotten, but I'll remind you. James turns 9 this Sunday, and we haven't even bought him a present yet. It's like Joyce woke up. Are you serious? Sunday already? What's the date today? Oh, Mum, you're so funny, she marveled at her daughter. Greetings to distant space travelers from Earthlings. On our planet, today is Tuesday, the 4th of September. The time is 1837. I'm really confused about the days at work, Joyce confessed. It's been a nightmare today, and I've got a translation due. I couldn't get round to it. Joyce seemed exhausted. In the 4 years she had spent as a widow, a lot had changed in her life. She still worked for Martin. She was no longer the office manager, but his personal assistant. Her salary was rising in line with inflation. Joyce still hadn't learned how to cope with the problem of being broke. Catherine had become a teenager with growing needs. James had already started 3rd grade, and Elizabeth would be starting school next year. Joyce worked hard to give her children everything they needed. But quality clothes and newfangled gadgets cost a lot, and the woman did not want her favorite offspring to stand out from their peers. Of course, Catherine constantly argued with her in the shop, choosing things simpler and cheaper. But Joyce couldn't be persuaded. "Let me finish early tomorrow," her mother continued. "You and I will go shopping and pick out something interesting. Do you know what he'd like?" "Oh, Mum," Joyce. "Shame on you. You've forgotten all about us. You don't even know what your son is interested in." That's it, said Catherine. "I'm joking. I understand perfectly well. You're not a little girl, I know everything. I'll show you when we get there. We'll have to stop by the Albion shop." "All right, my daughter, whatever you say," gave up mother. "There should be enough money. I hope I've been saving." Catherine vanished out the door, leaving Joyce alone with her thoughts. 4th of September, the woman reflected. After all, the day after tomorrow will be 4 years since he's been gone. We'll at least have to go to the cemetery. Joyce went to her husband's grave once a year. She couldn't stand it any longer. To see his smiling face etched on the black granite slab. She couldn't. Immediately, a heavy wave of memories of the past came crashing down on the equally hard granite of the present. She had never taken the children with her. Only once Catherine had traveled with her, but seeing her daughter's tears was even more unbearable than her husband's stony smile. After leaving work early, Joyce took her usual route. Martin, having learnt where his assistant was going, offered to give her a lift. But it was important for Joyce to make the journey alone. There were no traffic jams yet, so she reached the cemetery quickly. On the way, she stopped at a flower shop and bought 4 snow-white roses tied with black satin ribbon. The shop assistant smiled sympathetically at her, adding even more tragedy to the situation. At the cemetery gate, Joyce did not see the typical picture of peddlers soliciting paper flowers. The beggars and cripples that usually sat along the paths were not present on a weekday. Only the sounds from the granite workshop and the few wreaths gathered near the entrance reminded her that this place still had something to do with the world of the living. Joyce walked with an uncertain gait, noting on the way the landmarks she remembered from her previous visits: the lush fence, the graves of some authority figure from the 90s, the sad angel mourning a 5-year-old girl who had left the world. A rubbish bin topped with a pile of colored funeral wreaths. Spotting a bifurcated birch tree, the woman turned onto the path on the right. "Here we go, just a little further and I'll be there," Joyce thought, sinking her heels into the soft ground. The birch trees were already beginning to turn yellow. Ahead could be seen a granite slab gleaming in the sun, casting a sort of sombre golden glow. 2 huge ravens sat on the table, eating something left over from an offering to the dead with gusto. There were plastic bottles lying everywhere, wilted flower heads, dry branches. "Doesn't anyone really clean up around here?" Joyce thought. "Is it so hard to take the rubbish away with you?" "Well, here I am," she said in a shaky voice, squatting down in front of the ever-smiling Albert. "I'm sorry I'm alone and haven't been here in a while, love. I brought flowers. I know you didn't like them much, but it's tradition." With those words, Joyce put the roses in a jar of water, putting aside the withered remains of the ones from last time. "And the children are all grown up now. Catherine's a real bride. You wouldn't even recognize her. She looks just like you." The woman pulled out her phone and started flipping through pictures of the kids. "James is 9 now. Yesterday I went with Catherine to pick out a present for him. You'd think your son was into aeromodeling. They got him a plane like that. Catherine said he'd jump through the ceiling when he saw it, and Elizabeth is a year away from school. She's smart. She's already reading and writing. I even do French with her sometimes." Joyce sighed heavily, wiping away her tears with the palm of her hand. She didn't know what else to say to a dead man. All this superstition had never appealed to her. Even as a child, going to the cemetery with her relatives, she hadn't understood these meaningless conversations with the earth, libations of vodka on the grave, greetings and farewells. Well, a man is gone, he's gone. What can be done about it? What does he care about the survivors now? "How am I doing?" Joyce said, answering her own question, supposedly asked by the silent interlocutor. Same old, same old. I'm working for Martin. I don't know where we'd be now if it weren't for him. I don't make a lot of money, of course, but it's enough to live on. Cassandra's been very supportive. She's retired and often takes the younger ones to her cottage. I took them all summer, teaching them to garden. Elizabeth couldn't get out of the berry patch. And James has learnt to swim. I'm thinking of enrolling him in the pool. He needs sport anyway, Joyce said. For about 15 minutes, she sat in complete silence, immersed in her memories. The birdsong put her in a sort of meditative state. Suddenly, this calm was broken by a crackling noise. Joyce gave a startled shudder and looked round. An old man was standing not far from her, looking at her hesitantly. "I'm sorry to startle you," the elderly man addressed Joyce peacefully. "You see, it's Thursday. There's nobody here. And I'm lost again. I'm so lucky to have met you." "No, not at all," the woman replied. "You didn't scare me at all. I was just thinking and didn't expect anyone else to be here. Can I help you? If it's not too much trouble, could you help me find my wife's grave? It's been so many years and I keep getting lost in these gravestones. It's like she doesn't want me to see her like this." The old man smiled embarrassedly. Yes, of course," Joyce agreed, rising from the ground. "Well, Albert, goodbye, I'll be off. I promise not to be discouraged. I'll give the children a hug." Joyce walked towards the old man, shaking off the hem of her cloak. She noticed he was holding a tiny bouquet of lavender. What a thing, she thought. I wonder where he found these flowers. And they don't look artificial. "My name is Winston," the older man introduced himself. "And I'm Joyce." "Nice to meet you," Joyce Winston said. "I'm sorry we met in such a peculiar environment," the old man said apologetically. "I see you're interested in my flowers." "To be honest, yes," Joyce nodded. "I didn't think you could find lavender in our town at this time of year. Even abroad, it's out of season. Are you interested?" "I am," Winston smiled. "When my late wife and I went to Provence, we visited the lavender fields. The guide told us that these flowers are rarely found outside the country. They don't take root anywhere, that the climate is not suitable, or something else. So I was surprised it's just lavender. I grow them in my own greenhouse." "All right, well, that's a bit of a mouthful, but what about lavender?" "My wife was very fond of lavender," Winston said. "I didn't share that sentiment, but I can't come here empty-handed. I'd like to make her happy." "Mary," he corrected himself. "Oh yes," the old man was worried. "Let's try to find the tombstone. I used to turn off at that stone bollard over there, but it's all changed in a year. It's weird. I can't find a white marble monument, not very tall, and there's a wrought iron bench next to it." "Mary." Joyce looked around. She'd never taken much interest in who was buried next to her husband. A couple of rows to the right, she spotted several similarly described monuments and immediately headed for them. On the third try, she found the right grave. "Winston," she called out. "I think I found it. Come here." The old man wandered slowly between the rows of graves, trying not to stumble on the grassy paths that were slippery from the recent rain. "Hello, Mary," he said cheerfully, kneeling down on the ground. "Again, you didn't want me to come, and very wrongly. You're always thinking of yourself. You know what? I'll find him." Joyce was looking at the photograph on the monument. It was of an elderly but strikingly beautiful woman. There was something subtly oriental about her appearance, and her eyes were laughing, filled with childlike joy. Judging by the date on the plaque, the woman had died 10 years ago, and also on the 6th of September. As you can see, Joyce thought, that's quite a coincidence. I wonder what it was from. She wasn't very old. She must have been ill. Suddenly, the old man's voice broke the silence and interrupted her thoughts. He spoke in French. The last thing Joyce had expected to hear was French poetry. Not just any poetry, but an extract from a famous poem by Arthur Rimbaud, to whom she had dedicated her thesis. Rolling tides and in winter's cold. I ran, baffled as the mind of children and peninsulas, breaking away from the land, had not learnt the triumph of such wild passions. By itself, Joyce's translation of the stanza spoken by Winston succeeded. The old man froze, slowly turned his head in her direction, and looked with surprise at the woman for whom it had cost nothing not only to recognize a rare poem, but also to reproduce it in Russian. Well, well, he said. I see you like Rimbaud? You see, Joyce replied, sitting down on the bench. When I was a student, I studied French, and this poem by Rimbaud was the subject of my thesis. I'm literally fascinated by this young poet, because he didn't have much else to write. And this poem left a significant mark on French poetry and literature in general. To say that I was surprised to hear it here now, and in excellent French, is an understatement. Yes, Winston laughed. There are coincidences in life. And how can you not believe that everything in the world happens for a reason? Joyce, that poem. Mary was literally obsessed with it. My wife had an excellent knowledge of French, and as a young woman she was fond of translating the classics. Then one day she came across Rimbaud, and you realize how difficult it was to get hold of such literature, even for students. She read the translation, but it seemed to her that it did not convey the essence of the original, and Mary was a very persistent and determined girl. So she decided to create her own translation. I have an old notebook at home in which my wife wrote down her versions, but she was never able to perfect them, as she thought. It would be very interesting to see it, Joyce said. I touched on the subject of translation during the defense, but it was about the popular versions. I'm interested purely from a professional point of view. If you're really interested, then you're welcome to visit, Winston replied. I live alone. My son got married a long time ago and moved to the capital. He visits once every couple of years, Winston continued. I'm afraid to fly. I've never even seen my grandchildren in person. Mary's gone. I'm a recluse. My friends have all left this world long ago. If it's not too much trouble, come and see me. I live near the Central Library, you know. Maybe the house with the columns in the original? I know, Joyce smiled. The old man's offer might have seemed dubious to some, but the woman felt that the man was very lonely, and the sincerity with which he told her the details of his life was endearing. Besides, Joyce really wanted to look at Rimbaud's translations. Her professional interest was making itself felt. I'll definitely come. Let's do it tomorrow at 5 o'clock. It'll be convenient. I'll have a couple of hours to spare. Of course, assured her old man. Come, I'll treat you to a specialty coffee, a woman's recipe. I'll leave you my phone number. If anything changes, let me know. The new acquaintances stayed at the cemetery for some time, and then Joyce kindly offered to give Winston a lift home. All the way he told her about the peculiarities of growing flowers in the greenhouse. Joyce had never realized it could be so interesting. She returned home in high spirits. Catherine had already come home from school. We must eat quickly, Joyce said. Mother and daughter went to the kindergarten. Elizabeth managed to get into a fight with a boy who was pulling her braids. The conflict ended with a torn shirt. The child's angry mother demanded compensation from Joyce for the spoilt item. Unwilling to listen to an explanation, Joyce silently pulled out the money. Noticing that the purse was almost empty, she muttered. Yes, it's still a couple of days before payday. She didn't scold Elizabeth, noting only. A real lady would not defend her honor with her fists, but would seek revenge using her intelligence. How's that, Mummy? I don't understand. You and I will definitely talk about it, but a little later. But I'm still glad you didn't let yourself be offended. Mum, Catherine intervened in the conversation. Why did you give that bitch the money? It's clear that it's her child's fault. If you'd stayed out of it, you'd still be in one piece, Catherine said. Sometimes you have to give in, said the mother. I realize what a conflict would lead to now. We'd have a fight with her. She still won't admit that her son is at fault. After all, then I will question her love and methods of upbringing. And there's no way to prove anything to an offended soul. He'd end up attacking Alex again tomorrow, only with his mother's encouragement. And now we'll teach our princess how to take revenge on the offender without using fists, so that she won't bother again. And this, as you called her, bitch doesn't have enough brains to realize that her son was insulted. Well, Mum, Catherine stretched out, laughed. What a sly one you are. Having finished her work, Joyce remembered that she had promised to stop by Winston's. She called her eldest daughter and arranged for her to pick Elizabeth up from kindergarten, telling her that she would be a little late. Mum Catherine piped up, Are you late for work or are you going on a date? What date, baby? Joyce laughed. I've got an appointment. I'll try not to be long. Okay? All right, Catherine whispered, don't worry. Joyce bought some cakes on the way. She didn't want to go to the house empty-handed. She knew a good bakery that sold inexpensive but delicious sweets. She liked to take her children there when she had free time for a joint day off. The woman parked in front of the impressive stuccoed front door, noting that the house where the old man lived did not look simple, even by modern standards. In the old days, representatives of the ruling elite, diplomats, academics, high-ranking officials lived in such Stalinist high-rises. But today, only very wealthy people could afford a flat in such an architectural object. Winston lived on the 7th, top floor. Joyce took a rare lift with a sliding cast-iron grill and noticed the rich decoration of the stairwell. The walls were decorated with moldings, the marble floors were clean, and each door had a gilded plaque with the initials of the owners. When she rang the bell at the door that said Winston lived behind it, the woman waited a long time for the door to be opened. Winston greeted her with a broad smile. The old man was dressed in an immaculately tailored gray woolen suit that made him look much younger. Good evening, dear Joyce. The man greeted her. I didn't expect you to come. Why not? The woman asked, embarrassed. Well, you'd have to admit, meeting in a cemetery is a rather dubious way to start a relationship, the older man smiled. Though, considering the way life flows nowadays, it's surprising that strangers can even talk to each other and find a common theme. I confess, Joyce replied, I am driven by professional interest, and I'd like to try your advertised coffee. I brought some cakes too. Thank you. Winston took the bundle of treats. Please come in. Joyce walked into the huge living room. The flat had high ceilings of at least 4 meters. One wall of the spacious room was completely filled with shelves of books. On the shelves were whole collections of rare editions, which the owner of the library had collected for decades. There were even some ancient-looking medieval manuscripts and editions with traces of time on their covers. Apparently, the owner of the flat was a man extremely well-read. The order of the bookshelves made it clear that the contents were not just decoration or an attempt to impress. I see you like my little collection? Winston asked, bringing trays of coffee and sweets into the room. It's quite small, Joyce said, still looking at the books. There are at least 2,000 volumes here. 3,047. To be exact, said the old man. There were more, but when Mary died, I donated some of it to the university library, as she had willed. And now that I'm retired, I can't afford to read as much as I used to. My eyesight's not what it used to be. And you know, it was more interesting to discuss what I read with Mary than to be alone with my opinions. Sometimes I'd open her favorite illustrated editions and just admire the drawings. Here, for example, Winston reached for one of the shelves, where there was a whole collection of brightly colored covers decorated with golden Arabic ornaments. Winston displayed Tales of 1001 Nights, an amazingly beautiful full-size book covered in silk with a glossy marbled insert depicting a tent in a flowering garden. It's a 1913 French edition with illustrations, he said. Oh my God, it's beautiful. Joyce marveled. I'd never have realized that such copies were in private collections. It's a work of art. You're right, smiled the old man. Such collections can easily be sold at auctions for decent money. Today there are no more than 5 complete collections of such books. But I will not sell my fairy tales for any money. You see, they are not just well-preserved volumes, they are memories. Moments of happiness, forever gone, but also forever in my soul. Mary and I bought this collection in Paris, would you believe it, at a flea market, and for only 300 francs. Although at the time it seemed a fabulous sum to us. When Soviet citizens got to foreign countries, they bought everything that was different from their usual life. But for some reason, Mary and I did not go to fashionable shops and perfume shops, but went straight to hunting for antiques. The seller asked 400 francs for the books, but we had only 300 francs left. Seeing the fire in my wife's eyes, the merchant could not stand it and gave in. Probably then he regretted 1,000 times, because today the cost of such a collection is at least 30,000 euros. Oh, really? Joyce marveled. Is it really true? It's true, sighed the old man. So what good is money if you can't buy anything with it? Think about it. How can I, an old man, afford such a sum? It won't bring me joy. Shall I put it in the bank? What for? For a funeral, maybe. Because it's expensive. And it's expensive to send yourself to the next world for that kind of money. I'm not some pharaoh. Joyce laughed. Winston was right. She wondered what she would have done herself. If she owned such expensive books, she probably wouldn't hesitate to sell them. He's the one who doesn't need the money. Joyce has children to raise. Every penny counts. That kind of luxury is a thing of the past. What if the books belong to the children? Joyce wondered. Then, no, not at any price. It would be too low. She'd be better off scrubbing floors. She wouldn't sleep at night, but she wouldn't deny her family the right to such a treasure. Winston sipped his tea from a fine china cup. "Oh, what lovely coffee!" Joyce exclaimed. "I've never tasted anything like it." "I'm glad you appreciate my specialty recipe," laughed the old man, "though it's not quite right to call it your own. I learned to make coffee this way from an old Arab named Amin. His coffee shop was located in one of the old neighborhoods. Arabs appreciate coffee. For them, it's not just a drink, but a whole culture." "How interesting," Joyce exclaimed. "Have you traveled a lot?" "A lot," Winston sighed. "But Algeria is a special subject for Alice and me. You see, she was an interpreter at the embassy. She was sent to North Africa right after college. At that time, the Union was actively establishing relations with the Arab states. There weren't many specialists. That's where she and I met." "And you're a translator too?" Joyce was surprised. "No, not at all," smiled the old man. "I was an archaeologist." "An archaeologist?" Joyce marveled. "Yes, I agree. It's not an ordinary profession," Winston replied. "For a long time our group had excavated all over the United States. My specialty is Orientalism. I lived in Uzbekistan for a long time. We found a lot of stuff there. But in the 70s I received an unusual offer from my university to go to Algeria to excavate in Jamil. Of course I agreed. It was practically impossible to go abroad at that time. I should not have refused such a chance. An interest, you can't deny it. But here we went to Africa. At first, of course, everything seemed wild, especially the unbearable heat and the absence of the usual amenities. We drove into the mountains. It was very hard to get there, and to be honest, it was scary. The very terrain and people were frightening, and our guide looked like a criminal. Jamil is an ancient Roman city. They began to study it in the early 20th century, so we were not pioneers, but we had to take into account that Algeria is not a developed country. No roads, no proper shops, and it's in the middle of nowhere. We had to carry all the luggage, provisions, and equipment on our backs. We had a few mules. I'm still amazed at how hardy they are. And Norman, the guide, even though he had a creepy appearance, turned out to be a reliable man. He saved us from many dangers. We were several months away from civilization, surrounded by ancient ruins. There were ghosts and creatures everywhere. But the scariest of all were the nights, or rather the cold that came with them. It's unbelievable when the temperature rises to +50 during the day and drops below 0 at night in the mountains. Of course, it's a peculiar pleasure. But we were young and brave and obsessed with digging. "How did you and your wife meet?" Joyce asked. "And Mary?" Winston sighed. "Mary and I first met when our group was on its way home." The old man drew in more air, as if preparing to dive underwater. After a long pause, he began his story. The excavations at Jamil were a success. Winston's group managed to find the remains of thermal baths and well-preserved mosaic floors. They even managed to get hold of a few clay jugs, which were quite well preserved. Such a find was rare, so the archaeologists were already preparing to rest on their laurels of glory, having taken several hundred pictures, published dozens of articles in magazines, and carefully packed their equipment. The group intended to make the return journey in the morning. The last night began as usual. At first it was sharply cold. The guys built fires, cooked dinner, and sat down to tell stories. Life stories quickly became boring. Then the interpreter Norman began to pester Said to tell them something interesting about this place, something he had encountered himself. The The guy did not agree for a long time, but after persistent persuasion and a couple of shots of vodka, his tongue was loosened. I had just started taking scientists to the ruins, said began. My first group was 4 young Frenchmen, said. The War of Independence had just ended. The atmosphere here was not the most favorable, but I liked that these young people were free of prejudice and didn't hold their noses. There was a photographer among them. I think his name was Jean, though I could be wrong. They reached Jamil quickly. It was the beginning of September. It was not very hot during the day, so it was easy to walk. The boys set up camp at the site, and I went to harness the mules. What's stopping us here? Norman asked quickly. So it was decided to start the work in the morning. We were sitting by the fire, as we were now, and preparing to go to our tents. Suddenly, one of the guys noticed that Jean was gone. When the photographer left, no one noticed. At first, we thought he had gone to sleep in the tent. He didn't turn up. We went round the neighborhood, calling for him, trying to find him with torches, but no luck. The guy was gone without a trace. It's not hard to get lost here, but there's a risk of wandering into the mountains and falling into a crevasse. Sleep was out of the question. Every minute counted. We split into pairs and continued our search. Francois and I went into the mountains, and the other 2 lads went to explore the ruins. When dawn broke, my partner and I returned to camp. As we approached, Luke, one of the guys who had gone to the ruins, came running towards us. He was waving his arms and shouting at us to hurry up. We ran after him toward the amphitheater. There on the steps sat Eugene. His head was as white as chalk, though only yesterday he had been a burly brunette. He was frantically clutching his camera and muttering to himself the word Mopana. The guy seemed to be unable to see anyone or anything around him. His pupils were severely dilated and his lips were chapped. He did not respond to our words. We got him to the camp, gave him tea, and put him to bed. By morning he seemed to have regained consciousness, but he remembered nothing at all. Perhaps he had managed to photograph something, but I was not to find out. As soon as the guys left, I never heard from them again. Sam broke the silence around the fire. You know, I went out of the tent last night to take a leak, and just in the area of the amphitheater I saw some kind of glow. I thought it looked like the moon was setting, even though it was overcast. What if it was haunted? That's a bit of a stretch, Sam said. Norman. There's no such thing as ghosts. Yeah, Winston, the leader of the group, said skeptically. He had always thought such stories were rubbish. He wasn't going to believe them, but he couldn't sleep well after what he'd heard. When all the boys had gone to their tents, Winston lay still for a long time, wondering what the Frenchman could have seen in the ruins that he had turned gray overnight. Suddenly, his musings were interrupted by a crackling noise from the street. He poked his head out of the tent, but it was empty. Only the embers of the fire were slowly going out. He was about to climb back in when the crackling sound came again. The sound was loud and distinct, coming from the direction of the ruins. But no Winston muttered, climbing out of the tent. Whatever it was, it didn't sound like it was coming from the other side of the world. The boy did not wake anyone, and, armed with a strong lantern and a stout stick, set off in the direction of the amphitheater. There was someone in the center of the structure. Winston froze, not understanding how a person could be here. The logical explanation was that it was someone from the camp, but the figure was dressed in something light-colored, covering almost the entire body. Winston gripped the stick tighter and aimed the beam of light at the man sitting below. "Hey, what are you doing here?" shouted the archaeologist. The figure didn't move. Oliver sank down a couple of steps and froze, sweating with fear. Had the boys decided to play a trick on him, knowing how he felt about all sorts of mysticism? "Norman," he shouted, "if they're trying to scare me, it won't work. I'm going to use this stick." Winston confidently ran down the steps and approached the figure, swinging the stick. Suddenly, the figure rose sharply and turned round. The lantern illuminated a woman's face covered in blood. Winston stepped back, paralyzed with fear. The woman stared at him in silence. "Who are you?" Winston spoke in plain English. "Do you need help? We have a first aid kit. I'll get it for you. Just don't go anywhere. Do you understand me? I'll be back." He was about to leave when suddenly the woman grabbed his arm and addressed him in clear Russian. "You're not a hallucination, you're real. Are you here alone? I didn't hope for help anymore. You see, our motorcade was attacked. We were on our way to Seattle, but we got trapped on the way. Some men pulled us out of our cars, started pushing us around, trying to get us into their truck. I managed to get away. You see, it's getting dark fast. I know the city's not far away, but I'm totally disorientated. I came across these ruins and decided to wait out the night. But it's very cold. If it wasn't for you, I think I'd have frozen to death by morning. Only now Winston noticed that the stranger was wearing a silk business suit that was stained and torn in places, and what he took for a blanket was a jumper and an Arab headscarf. "Lord, let's go to the camp," Oliver exclaimed, taking the woman under his arm. "Can you walk?" "I think so," she answered. "Only my heel seems to be broken." Winston helped her to the camp, lit a fire and sat her on a bench. From the tent he got 2 blankets and a first aid kit. Treating the wound on the stranger's face, the guy saw that she was still quite young, no more than 25 years old. "What is your name?" asked the archaeologist. "My name is Winston. I am an American archaeologist who by fate found himself in this wilderness." "And I'm Mary," the girl answered and even tried to smile. It was obvious that she was still frightened. "Mary Smith. I work at the American Embassy as an interpreter. We traveled from Algeria on a diplomatic mission to a local university. But as I said, we were attacked on the way." "God, what about Sebastian and the others?" She continued confusedly. "I'm the only one who escaped." The girl appeared greatly disturbed. Winston, too, was alerted to the fact that bandits might be lurking nearby. Of course, they had a few guns in the camp, but they could hardly serve as a good defense. "There's no point in worrying about that now," the archaeologist said hastily. "You can't help anyway. Tomorrow we will go down to the city. And there we will think what to do in this situation. Right now you should be glad that you were not captured by these bandits and did not die in the mountains." Norman's head emerged from the tent. Loud voices woke him up. The others also seemed to wake up. In a minute, the whole group was already sitting around the fire. They were surprised at the appearance of a woman in the camp, and a very beautiful one at that. Nobody fell asleep till morning. First, everyone listened to the story of the appearance of a stranger in the camp, and the remaining few hours were on duty. In the morning, the archaeologists loaded their loads onto mules and set off for town. Mary was placed on one of the pack animals, and Winston walked beside her, ready to support her at any moment. You know, if Syed hadn't told us that terrible story the night before Winston began, I'd be fast asleep. I'm afraid to imagine what would have happened to you." "What was the story?" Mary asked. "Was it about ghosts in Roman ruins?" "Exactly," laughed the boy. "I don't believe in all that, of course, but somewhere inside there's still hope that there's something left after death." "And I believe that we don't go away forever," she said sadly. At the gendarmerie, Mary explained at length to an officer in mirror-polished shoes and white gloves. "What happened yesterday?" The officer called somewhere several times, making the girl languish in suspense. Winston never left her side. The rest of the guys had gone to a hotel to rest. He realized there was no way Mary could be left alone. After a couple of hours spent in the station, it was learnt that the diplomatic motorcade was attacked by a group of radicals opponents of the ruling party. At that time, relations between the United States and Algeria were developing very unfavorably. But there were those who were against it. The diplomats were taken prisoner and ransomed. Mary got through to the embassy and learnt that the negotiations had been successful and that her colleagues would soon be safe. The other end of the line was very happy to hear that the girl was all right. They offered to send a car for her, but Mary refused, preferring to get to the capital by train. Winston was very pleased with this option. It meant that for some time he would be able to continue his acquaintance with this amazing girl. After all, his group also had to take the train to get to the international airport. In the capital, Mary escorted Winston to his flight. Before boarding, they exchanged addresses and phone numbers. A year later, the girl returned to her homeland. By that time, between the young people, there were real feelings. And Winston, in order to please his beloved, even began to learn French. Mary was transferred to the consulate. She sometimes had to go to North Africa, but most of the time she spent in the United States. Winston tried to match his expeditions to his friends' business trips. so it turned out to spend more time together. 2 years later, lovers played a wedding. Winston did not dote on his girlfriend. The girl shared all his hobbies, charged love for her own, so the newlyweds always had something to talk about. Hot arguments caused a discussion of literature. Mary passionately collected books, and if Winston preferred history and architecture, she grabbed every volume of poetry. On their honeymoon, they managed to go not anywhere, but to France. For American citizens, such a trip was something from the category of fantasy. Not everyone could afford to see the Eiffel Tower, but Mary's job at a foreign consulate was a great advantage. She was offered to accompany a high-ranking official to an international forum. The event was to last 3 days, and Mary could stay in a foreign country for another week. And to her great joy, she was allowed to take one relative with her. While his wife attended social receptions, Winston wandered around Paris, took lots of photographs, and practiced his conversational French. A simple American was fascinated by this majestic city. Architectural delights struck his imagination, and people conquered by their hospitality. When Mary's official activities were over, the couple could finally enjoy all this splendor together. The young wife dragged Winston to flea markets, museums, and cozy coffee houses. And at night they took long walks along the Seine embankment and dreamed of the future, enjoying the present. A year later, the couple had a son, Alex. Mary was over the moon with happiness. She inherited from her grandfather a huge flat in the center, where the couple immediately moved. Winston was swamped with work. He was sent to Fort Worth, near which were large-scale excavations of ancient sites. For 5 years, he was home for a maximum of 2 months a year. Mary almost completely took over the upbringing of her son, but even such long absences could not spoil the relationship between the spouses. On those rare days when Winston was home, he tried to make up for the entire period of his absence. Mary and little Alex marveled at how Daddy had so much energy and ideas for things to do together. He organized large-scale excursions around the city, took them to the countryside, arranged some fantastic costume plays at home, and still as heatedly argued with his wife about literary preferences. Finally, his forced exile ended and Winston sighed calmly, except that it became uneasy outside the window. The country was about to undergo a change of power, which some awaited with excitement, others with fear. By 1985, Winston, who successfully defended his doctorate, has already led his own archaeological unit at the university. He rarely traveled to the field, swamped with paperwork. By that time, the man had not yet turned 40, so he was very frustrated by the lack of practical research. Mary continued to work at the consulate, where she returned after her maternity leave. She didn't even have to worry about a position. There were only a handful of specialists like her. And thanks to her natural charm, even conflicts between delegations could be resolved. Alex was already in the 3rd grade and proudly wore a bright red pioneer tie around his neck. Unlike his parents, the boy had an extraordinary passion for English. Mary did her best to send him to one of the most prestigious language schools. By the standards of society, their family was considered exemplary, intelligent, educated, beautiful. The neighbors were especially envious of the fact that the couple never quarreled. Quarrels simply did not fit in their heads. How could they quarrel, living soul to soul? But the couple paid absolutely no attention to what was going on around them. Even suddenly fallen on the country, hard times could not break their strong family. When what was considered an unshakable power began to fall apart, Winston lost his job. No one cared about the ruins of the past when the ruins of the present formed all around. The couple were lucky. Mary was offered a long-term business trip, this time to Canada. The woman agreed without delay, realizing what could happen in her native country in the coming years. The most painful part of the move was perceived by Alex. By that time, he was going through a difficult period of teenage maximalism. Especially, he was in love with his classmate and almost ran away on the eve of the flight. But Winston had a serious talk with his son, convincing him of the need for a temporary move. In Canada, the boy came in handy excellent knowledge of English. He quickly adapted to school and made new friends. Winston managed to get a job as a consultant at the Faculty of Archaeology at the University of Montreal. The couple returned to the States only in 2008, when the country was recovering from another crisis. Alex stayed in Canada, by then enrolled in college. For some reason, Mary was sure that her son would never return to the States. As it turned out, she was right. Alex finished college in Canada, then got a job in New York, married well, and only occasionally came to visit his parents. The couple returned to their luxurious flat, which had been rented for the past few years by a German diplomat. Mary was delighted to find that her favorite books had literally been dusted off. The life of husband and wife flowed again in the usual course. Winston found an interesting niche for himself, consulting and organizing private archaeological expeditions, the demand for which increased sharply by 2000. At home, he only had time to wonder where, and his wife by that time has already passed the 50-year milestone. So much energy. The woman left the civil service and took up tutoring. She liked teaching students French. Young people listened with interest to her stories about her amazing travels in French-speaking countries. And then a terrible thing happened. Mary had a stroke. She was completely paralyzed on the right side of her body. It happened on 6th September 2002. Winston was away at the time, learned about what happened on the phone, and immediately dropped everything to return to his beloved wife. After a long period of rehabilitation, the mobility of the limbs never returned. The disease has severely distorted her speech. All that mattered to Winston was that his wife was alive. But it seemed to Mary that such an existence could not be called life. Winston treated her like a child. He was increasingly annoyed with her. At some point she was very distant, refused to accept his help, so it was necessary to hire a nurse. In rare moments, when Mary's mood improved, he went into her room and read her long Arabian fairy tales. The woman would cry. Winston was confused. He realized that he was completely helpless in this situation. He even tried to go to a psychologist to establish a relationship with his wife, but everything was to no avail. Mary did not want to be a burden, so she gradually faded away. This went on for 10 years. And then one morning, 6th September 2012, Winston, as usual, went into the bedroom of his wife to say good morning, but was horrified to find her dead. Mary had drifted off to sleep. Her face was calm and even somehow happy. After hearing of his mother's death, Alex returned. The funeral was lavish. Say goodbye to Mary came all her former colleagues, numerous friends. Winston, however, the death of his beloved undermined. The man withdrew into himself, stopped all contact with society. He was horrified to realize that together with Mary went that part of him that made him enjoy every day. His son begged the old man to go with him to the capital, but for Winston such a thing was unacceptable. He took an interest in floriculture, began to grow in indoor greenhouses, his late wife's favorite flowers, lavender. And every year he carried fragrant bouquets to her grave. The old man sighed heavily as he finished his story. Joyce could see that the memories were causing him unbearable pain. She's been gone 10 years now. But I hope every time I hear her voice again, he said. I know what it's like, Joyce replied. My story, though not as romantic, is that when my husband left, my world literally turned upside down. For 4 years now I've been trying to cope with the loss, but I still can't get used to the fact that he's gone. Joyce, Winston said to her, thank you for listening to the old man's story. You're the first person I've been able to talk to so easily in 10 years. And, I'm relieved. Winston, this date, the 6th of September, is a fateful date, Joyce said thoughtfully. Did you meet Mary on that day? She fell ill and died on the same date. My husband died on the 6th of September, and you and I met on the same date. Don't you find that odd? I don't know, my dear, said the old man. I don't believe in mysticism, but I can't help thinking that maybe there is a connection. Winston, Joyce suddenly suggested, come and visit us on Sunday. It's my son's birthday. I'd love for you to meet the children, Joyce said. She felt sorry for the lonely old man, trapped in this huge flat, alone with his memories of his wife. She liked him very much, so she thought it was appropriate to invite him to the family party. I don't know, Winston replied uncertainly. Would I be in the way? Not at all. Joyce was quick to reassure him. Of course not. You're such an interesting man. I think it would be nice for you and my children to get to know each other. And you and I have a lot to talk about. Honestly, I can't stand to see you lonely. Please come. All right, the old man laughed in reply. I will. From then on, Winston became a frequent visitor to the Joyce family's flat. The children immediately fell in love with the elegant and talkative grandfather, who had stories for every occasion. They listened for hours about his expeditions, traveling to other countries. Often Winston invited them to his house. Catherine was captivated by the old man's library. Together with Elizabeth, they read French fairy tales, looking at ancient engravings depicting the stories. Grandfather, otherwise they did not call Winston, spoilt the children with sweets, showed the outlandish things brought by him from foreign trips. Joyce was happy to have such a friend in the family. They chatted constantly with Winston over coffee, discussing everything that could come to mind. As a conversationalist, the old man was unrivaled. He literally knew everything about everything. Gradually, Joyce got rid of the heavy burden of the past. One weekend, Winston came to visit and immediately took Joyce aside. "Joyce," he began, "we've been in touch for a long time, and I'm amazed at how much my life has been enriched by having someone so close to me in it. I can see how hard it must be for you to raise these wonderful children alone. Tell me honestly, are you happy with your life?" "I don't understand you, Winston," Joyce replied with embarrassment. "Of course I'm content. I have beautiful children, a roof over my head, and now I've got a friend like that. I can't complain, can I?" "That's a good answer," Joyce smiled the old man. "But that's not what I mean," Winston continued. "Let me get this straight. Do you have enough to live on?" Joyce opened her mouth, not knowing what to say. They had never discussed material matters. Well, Winston knew that she worked as a manager in a small firm. She'd never disclosed her salary, but it wasn't hard to guess that it was barely enough to support such a large family. The flat was in treacherous need of repairs. The car was literally screaming for emergency assistance. But did it matter? Joyce, Winston continued seriously, "You may not say anything, but I'm not a fool. I can see this isn't easy for you. And frankly, it's a shame to see such a talented and versatile man wasting away in a hopeless job. That's why I have something to offer you. I've been talking to some of my old mates. Tell me, would you be interested in working in your specialty?" "What do you mean?" Joyce was surprised. "What do you mean?" "As a translator." "Joyce, come on. There's a big company looking for a French translator. It's a prestigious job. It's a branch of a well-known French pharmaceutical company. Believe me, you'll be hired." "I've already forgotten the language," Joyce mumbled embarrassedly. "It's nothing," Winston hastened to reassure her. "You speak perfectly well. You don't even have an accent. I know what I'm talking about. If you agree, come to the interview tomorrow. It's more of a formality, but you have to come and get acquainted. You can start work right away." Winston, she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "If you're serious, of course I'll do it. What time tomorrow?" "Hang on, Joyce. Tomorrow's the 6th of September. Joyce was really enjoying her new job. She had to socialize with interesting people and regularly fly to France to accompany her boss. She had been in her position for 2.5 years. During this time, it turned out to be possible to establish a life. The children were transferred to a prestigious school. The eternal material problems fell away somehow by themselves. Even in her personal life, there was a shift. Joyce finally let Albert go, and one of her colleagues had a clear sympathy for her, which, to Joyce's surprise, turned out to be mutual on her part. One day her phone rang in the middle of the night, waking her from sleep. She did not immediately understand the meaning of what she heard. A familiar voice announced that Winston had passed away today. The old man had gone quietly, his heart stopping in his sleep. Joyce wept. Over the past few years, this elderly man had managed to become a true friend to her, even more a family man. But his passing had not caused hysteria. She was glad that at last this man would meet his beloved somewhere in heaven, where he stubbornly refused to believe with his mind, but recognized with his heart. Joyce helped with the funeral arrangements. Rummaging through the flat, she found a letter addressed to her, which Winston had apparently written shortly before his death. With trembling hands, she unsealed the envelope. Joyce pulled out a neatly written piece of paper. "My dear Joyce, I didn't want to upset you prematurely, but I feel like I don't have much time left. I'm glad that at the end of my days, life has turned color again. Both you and your children are a real miracle. I have tried to do my best to help you deal with whatever has been keeping you from breathing fully. I want that from now on you have everything so that nothing will prevent you from developing and loving life. So please accept my humble gift for James and Elizabeth, because I know that for yourself you will refuse. With sincere respect and love for you. Winston." Joyce ran her hands over the sheet, not understanding what Winston meant. She was both happy and sad to receive such a message from him after he had gone. Soon Joyce forgot about the letter and plunged headlong into the abyss of everyday life. What was her surprise when 6 months later she received a call from the notary inviting her to attend the reading of Winston's will. At the appointed hour, the 6th of September, the woman entered the office, where she was informed that the last will of the deceased was to bequeath his flat to James, Elizabeth and Catherine Jones, and the library stored in it their mother Joyce Harrison.
Emma stood looking at the wall, which was half wooden, half plastered. Those black letters, which were scrawled in charcoal or scraped and darkened by time, stabbed her eyes. She blinked, a tear falling down her cheek. When the woman went into labor, she already knew she was having a girl. But why so early? She was getting frustrated. Be patient. Her sister held her hand. I'm doing the best I can. Angelica clutched her eyes. That's it. The sister looked out the window of the ambulance. The hospital should be showing soon. When already exhaled with a sound the woman in labor. Now, be patient, my dear. They had already wrapped up in front of the hospital building. It didn't go as planned, but the baby was born. A girl? She looked at the doctor. Yes, he smiled. Emma had been born prematurely, so she needed extra care. Her parents had gotten over that. But what no one had expected was that she would develop another disease. The baby had to be taken to another hospital, and the mother could not be put there with the child. She went under the windows, whimpering, crying, wondering what was wrong with her baby. Angelica, I can tell you that your child is better. I can discharge you. The doctor pleased the woman. Is she going to be all right? She looked at the man with hope. I hope so. I want the baby to always do well, Angelica cried again. She and her husband had waited so long for this pregnancy that they had given up hope. Their eldest son was already 9 years old, and when they had already given up on everything, Angelica found out that she was expecting a child. What a surprise, rejoiced Stan, Angelica's husband. I'm glad, but I'm afraid to jinx it, she said quietly. From that time on, Stan protected his wife from whatever happened. If there was bad news, he hushed it up, smiling as if all was well. Some messed up at school, never said a word either. And now Emma's lying in her crib with her family. She liked that she had such a company. She felt like an adult. She thought it was possible to be rude to adults and do different things. And her father and mother never expected that a nice and good girl would grow up to be such a miracle. Emma, tomorrow is grandmother's anniversary. The whole family will have to go, her mother told her. Oh, again to go to this grandmother, listen to her strange stories. The girl did not understand why always do it. What are you saying? She is the only one we have left. There are no more old relatives. Took offense at her father. It was his mother. Well, I'll go, she said reluctantly, and went out again. Angelica, why don't you put her in her place? Her sister asked her. Yes, what place? Have you seen how she behaves? The woman lamented. Exactly. And it is necessary to put such people in their place immediately. If you give weakness now, then later you will not be able to cope with her at all. The sister was sure of it. Listen, how old I am. I want my daughter to love me, not hate me. The woman was ready to cry. Why should she hate you? The sister didn't understand that. It's just that if I start forbidding things now, she'll do the opposite. If I forbid her to go out late, she will go out even longer, and what will happen to her? I don't know, so let her go out. Her head and legs are safe. Everything is fine. Angelica didn't understand how to bring up her daughter. Unlike her, Emma's brother was quite different. He had long ago graduated from school, entered, studied, now worked and lived with his family. His mother wasn't worried about him at all. But her daughter, on the other hand, had gotten out of hand. The next day, as agreed, they gathered the whole family and went to her grandmother. She set the table and waited for the guests. When all the congratulations were over and the grandmother brought out the hot food, they started talking. "Didn't you try asking about my father again?" a woman asked. "We tried, but it's no use. There's no accurate information," Emma's father told her. "Oh, that's a shame." Grandmother lowered her head. And this was repeated every time the children gathered at her house. "How Mummy loved him," Sarah said. Come on, tell me. We can see you want to tell the story again." Angelica knew her mother-in-law loved to talk about her father, even though she didn't know much about him. "Emma, do you remember the story?" Her grandmother turned to her. "It began," sighed the girl. "We were just little kids then, my brother 9, my other brother 7, my older sister 5, and me 3. She'd always started with it. Yes, we remember you lived in a big house with your family. And then what happened?" asked her son. "He loved this place. It was the most interesting. The war started. We had to go to the front, but my father, because he had many children and was the only breadwinner, was not drafted. He volunteered himself. He said he couldn't just sit at home when the motherland was in danger," Sarah said. "So he went," her son continued for her. "Yes, he left. And then we'd get letters, and Mom would unfold this triangle, gather us, all the children around her, and read. Daddy wrote a lot. He loved Mommy so much that he kept repeating it. I was 3 years old, but I remember how fondly she read what was written in that triangle." Sarah looked around the table. She covered her face with her hands, exhaled, and continued. "There was nothing left until the end of the war. It was the winter of 45. My father hadn't written for a long time. And then, Mother saw the letter carrier. She ran out onto the porch. But it turned out to be a funeral. Not even a funeral, but the news that my father was missing. My grandmother brushed away an invisible tear. After that she smiled. Everyone sat and was silent. "What are you all quiet? Let's get on with it," she said, and the party continued. Emma sat there with a disgruntled face. She had heard this story a million times before and didn't understand why it had to be told again and again. And there were always new facts added. "Do you have a picture of your father?" her son asked her. "I do, but I have to look for it," she answered. "Can I go for a walk?" Emma got up from the table. She thought she'd accomplished her mission. She'd done all the official part. And now, when these conversations started, she just didn't want to listen to them. "Yes, of course, Emma, run along." Her grandmother looked at her. Her mother and father were against it, but there was nothing more they could say. Without even saying goodbye, the girl put on her shoes and went outside. She was with her friends again, everything repeated as usual. "Mom, we have to tell something about a relative who was in the war." Emma came home one day. "That's wonderful. Write about your grandfather." The woman turned to her. "And what will I write about him?" Did not understand the girl that his family stayed home. He wrote letters and then disappeared. "Well, let's make up that he was somewhere, participated in some serious battle, and after that went missing," suggested the mother. "And what, we're going to lie?" Emma wondered. "Why not? You'll write the truth." Mom was sure of her words. "What was Grandpa's name, anyway?" Emma asked. "Oliver," she told her. "Well, I'll write something myself." She went to her room, tore a sheet out of her notebook, and began to write something. "What did you get?" A woman came into her room in the evening. "Look," the girl wrote so much, it was amazing. The mother couldn't believe her eyes that her daughter could really make up so much. "I didn't make it up, but a friend told me about it, so I tied it to our grandfather." Emma told the truth. The mother sighed. She had read the whole story to the end. The connection with her grandfather was only in the name, surname, and patronymic, nothing else in common. Emma was still friends with her company, and she behaved very badly. One evening, she asked her mother to go to a disco, but it was already 2 o'clock in the morning and her daughter was still out. "Where do you think she is?" Angelica looked at her husband. "How do I know where your daughter is?" He was nervous too. That's why he was rude. The man went to bed, and Angelica sat waiting for Emma. Various images began to appear in her head, that she had been caught by some maniac or rapist and all the rest. She thought that if her daughter hadn't come in for so long, something must have happened to her. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the mother opened the door and there was Emma. "Where have you been?" Mother couldn't resist slapping her. "Mom, why?" She looked at her with red eyes. "Come quickly and go to bed," the woman said strictly, went to her room and lay down. "Are you here?" Her husband turned to her. "Yes," she nodded her head and closed her eyes. "Everything is fine, and you were worried," whispered the man. "Go to sleep," Angelica answered him. Further, everything went on exactly the same way. Mother and father were generally afraid that the daughter would not graduate from school, but to their surprise, Emma at the beginning of high school, namely in the 10th grade, left that company, began to communicate with classmates. Her studies tightened up, and unlike the way she studied in 7th grade, her grades were now very good. "Daughter, what happened to you?" her mother asked her. "Nothing. Why do you ask?" she wondered. "We thought that you would not go to the 10th, but you not only went to the 10th, but also began to study well," her mother honestly told her. "Mom, I'm in love," sat next to her girl. "And who is he?" exclaimed her mother. "You don't know him. This guy is older than me." Emma wanted to share with someone. "I hope you'll introduce us." Angelica was sure of it. "Sure, but it would take time," the girl said. They met Mickey at the same disco. One of their mutual acquaintances approached them. Then they joined their company. Then all the evening the guys were together, and the next day, when she was leaving school, the guy met her there with one flower in his hand. "Mickey." Emma was surprised at the time. "Hi, just thought I'd do you a favor." He handed her the flower. They walked down the sidewalk. Emma didn't know if she was going home or if Mickey had something to offer her. "Are you going home?" he asked her. "Yeah, I have to at least put my bag down," she pointed at it. "Okay, let's go. And then I'll take you out for ice cream," Mickey said childishly. Emma laughed. "What's so funny?" He didn't get it. "It's like we're 9 years old that you're asking me to go to the cafe for ice cream." She was still laughing. "Okay, I'm taking you to a cafe to drink champagne," he told her. She laughed again. "What's so funny now?" He didn't understand. No, it's just that she was smiling sweetly. With the guy had developed such a relationship that Emma didn't know how they felt about each other. Turns out she liked him and he liked her too. But he wasn't taking any action, Emma even less so. "You're always so mysterious," he told her. "I just want to know what's going on between us. I've already told my mother about you, and we still have nothing." The girl was truthful with him. "And what do you want?" He did not understand. "You and I have been together for more than 4 months. We go out every day. You pick me up, give me gifts, flowers, but we do not hug, do not kiss. I do not know how to understand our relationship. Are we just very good friends, or are we boyfriend and girlfriend?" She asked him. "Okay, if you need an official statement, then I'm telling you that you and I are boyfriend and girlfriend." Mickey was sure of it. "Okay, why aren't you hugging and kissing me then?" She asked him the next question. "I'm afraid," he admitted. "Of what?" She didn't understand. "You're just a little girl. How can I do anything to you?" He was very honest. So that's the problem, the girl realized now. All through 10th grade and summer vacation, they continued to be friends. And on September 1, when the girl went to the 11th grade, she decided to introduce Mickey to her mom and dad. "Here we are." They came into the apartment. "Oh, guys, come on in." Angelica greeted them on the doorstep. She was so pleased that her daughter had met such a handsome guy, who was now not against even coming to visit her. "Hello," said the young man politely. "Come in already," the girl hurried him. "Come on, Emma," looked at her sternly mother. They went into the room. The woman smiled all the time. She wanted to get to know her daughter's suitor better. There was cake and cups for tea on the table. Everyone made themselves comfortable. Mickey was silent at first. He was shy. There's no need to be embarrassed. Everyone is here. The woman touched his arm and spoke. It's okay. He looked up at her. Tell me about it. The father was ready to listen to the boy. Why are you picking on him? We're fine. Emma moved closer to her boyfriend. We're not bothering you. I just wanted to know if you're going to enroll now. And what are Mickey's plans? It's okay. We've already talked about it. The young man started talking at once. And what was decided? The mother was also interested. Emma will not go anywhere. She will enroll here. There is an option that if she leaves, I will follow her, at least for a while, the boy said firmly. Parents rejoiced. They realized that the daughter found a responsible and serious groom. Now they were not worried about Emmy's future. They realized that she would do well. Mickey, you need to make our grandmother, Angelica told him. Oh, not again, Emma whispered in his ear. Why would you do that? He turned to her. Yes, Sarah likes to tell the same story every time. But we're used to it. But Emma reacts that way every time, her mother said. Okay, thanks for everything. We have to go. Emma got up from the table. Come again. Her mother shook Mickey's hand. The young people left the apartment. What are we going to do? They stopped in the yard. Let's have a serious talk about school. Now I've made up my mind for your parents. But, you know, I have a job. I can't go after you. While he was saying all this, he was nervous. Mickey, I've already applied to another city, Emma said sadly. She thought that everything her boyfriend said was true. Okay, I'll try to do something, he went. Emma ran after him. Wait, it seemed to her that Mickey was starting to feel differently about her. Come on, he put his arm around her. The young people went to another city after all. The guy had transferred and now worked there. Together with Emma, they rented an apartment. They were practically a family now. Mickey, are we going to get married? She asked him cautiously at night. We would someday, he said. All right, she took offense, but said nothing aloud. So they went on with their lives, him working, her studying. Everything was fine, but Mickey never proposed. Emma graduated from college. She no longer asked, but insisted on getting married. Mickey, either we go to the registry office or we split up. How long can we wait? She shouted in the evening. What are you getting mad for? He looked at her. Don't you love me? She asked in the same loud voice. Why would you say that? He didn't understand why Emma couldn't wait. Why then? Now the girl was crying. Now you'll get a job. We'll get on our feet. We'll buy an apartment, and then we'll talk about the wedding. Mickey calmly explained. I love you. She squirmed against him. Everything's going to be okay, he kissed her. And Mickey wasn't lying. He worked hard, saved money. Emma got a job too. 3 years passed. The girl was coming back tired from work. She opened the door of the apartment, felt that smells delicious. Are you cooking? She was surprised. Come in. My love, he came out to meet her. Emma walked into the room. There was a table in the middle with appetizers, a cake, and a bottle of wine. What was the celebration? She started to remember. Maybe she had just forgotten. Emma, will you be my wife? He knelt down in front of her. Ah, she squealed and squeezed her eyes shut. Is that a yes? He stood up and handed her the ring. Yes, yes, yes. The girl jumped on the spot. She put the ring on her finger, took her hand away, admired it. The fatigue she had after a day's work went away instantly. Mickey poured wine into glasses. One of them served the girl. Soon the wedding was to take place. Let's not waste money, she whispered to him at night. Why, don't you want a party? He was surprised. He knew that all girls dream about it. No, let's buy a house, she was silent. What house? It was the first time he'd heard of it. I dream of having a house somewhere outside the city, in the countryside, so that you can go there, with friends to communicate, to rest your body and soul, Emma said. Why didn't she say anything? Mickey wondered. I don't know, she was happy. At the weekend, they went to Emma's parents and they met them. When they heard about the wedding, they congratulated them. We decided to just sign, so we'll call when we can come, the girl told her mother. You won't regret it later. The mother wasn't sure of her decision. No, we want to spend the money on something else, Emma said cryptically and looked at her future husband. Okay, suit yourself. The woman looked at her daughter and smiled. She was so happy for her. A few weeks later, Mickey and Emma became husband and wife. They rented an apartment, and with the money they had saved, they started looking for a suitable house. We should go to the experts, Emma said. That's what we'll do, her husband agreed. They called, found a realtor, and then started waiting for offers. After that, when the calls came in, they would choose whether or not to go to the village. No, it's too far. Mickey listened to the specialist. And this one was crowded. Emma didn't like it. The search continued. Emma was at work. The girls' colleagues proposed to organize a corporate party on Friday to celebrate the birthday of one of them. Of course, it had been a long time since they'd gotten together. Everyone agreed, and even the boss was okay with it. Mickey, I'll be late tonight, Emma told her husband at the end of the week. Have a good time, he kissed her. Emma put on her shoes, opened the doors and sprinted out of the apartment. At work, everyone was excited for the evening. At the end of the workday, the girls started setting up the tables. Emma, what's wrong? Casey looked at her. I'm fine, a little dizzy. She stood and held onto the table. Have some water and sit down. She walked over to her and handed her a glass. Thank you, she was shaking. After a sip of water, she felt better for a moment, and then her eyes went black and Emma fell to the floor. There was a rush of people, some calling medics, others lifting the girl up. She hadn't eaten anything all day. Maybe that's why, Casey said. The doctors will come and tell us everything. The assumptions were inappropriate here. Emma woke up before the ambulance arrived. What's wrong with me? She looked around at everyone here. You fainted, smiled Casey. Here come the doctors, came the voice of the supervisor. They gave Emma a sniff of ammonia, took her blood pressure. You'd better go home and come back tomorrow, the nurse advised her. Okay, she nodded. Let's go, I'll give you a ride. Casey gave her a hand. Thank you. Emma headed for the exit. There was a lot of weakness in her body. Emma, her husband came out into the hallway. Yes, she wanted to lie down. It's a holiday, isn't it? He didn't understand why she was early. I felt sick. So the girls brought me home. The girl went into the room and lay down. Can I get you anything? He was worried. No, Emma closed her eyes. The next day was Saturday. The clinic didn't work. So Emma spent the whole weekend in bed. Then on Monday, she phoned work, told them she'd be late and went to her appointment. You have all the signs that you're expecting a baby, the young doctor said. What? Why didn't she think of that? The symptoms are similar. I suggest you get it checked out, he smiled. Okay, thank you, Emma. As scolded, ran out of his office. She couldn't wait to tell her husband about everything. She walked down the street smiling. On the way, she stopped at the drugstore and bought a test just to be sure. Mickey wasn't home. She couldn't wait long for him. She had to go back to work after lunch. Emma had been on pins and needles all day. She couldn't wait to see her husband. She didn't say anything to her colleagues. She was afraid of jinxing him. Darling, I have such news for you. It's amazing. She flew home. She saw that the light in the windows was already on. What again? He knew his wife was always coming up with something new. I'm pregnant, she screamed. Emma, it's happiness. He took her hand and led her into the room. After that, the girl started to watch her diet. Mickey did everything for her too. The realtor didn't call. He asked Emma a few months later. No, she shook her head in the negative. I guess we must have tortured him with rejections, Mickey suggested. Never mind him. Emma was in no hurry to go anywhere. Mickey went to work. Emma was still laboring as well. She came back from work, but her husband wasn't home. The girl waited for him, but it was so late that Emma couldn't stand it and fell asleep. She woke up from the knocking of the door, looked at the clock. The time was 3 in the morning. "Where have you been?" She went out into the hallway. "Why are you up?" He didn't expect to be greeted. I asked a question. Emma waited for an answer. "Working," he sighed heavily. "What are you bullshitting me about? You've never been this late." She walked over to him. Not only did it smell like a woman's perfume, but there were lipstick marks on his earlobe. "Emma, calm down," he pleaded with her. "You're acting like a smeek." She went to her room. The girl had never been in this situation before, so she didn't know what to do. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't do it, afraid that the neighbors would hear. "I'm sorry," he came into the room. The devil got in the way. Mickey wanted to hug her, but Emma turned sharply. "Go away," she shouted after all. "What are you doing?" He looked at her. "Nothing," I said. She bent in half, inwardly, as if something had sliced her in half. "What's wrong with you?" Her husband jumped up immediately. "Stand back," the girl said in pain. He grabbed her in his arms, and just like that, in a road, dragged her to the car. "Let go," she lashed out, making it hurt even more. Mickey put his wife in the car and drove to the hospital. There, just as he had done at home, he took her in his arms and carried her into the building. She started to feel violently ill, he told the doctor. Emma was placed on a gurney, unable to lie down, squirming. "It's probably a miscarriage," said the doctor, who was walking beside her. He performed an examination, and his words were confirmed. After that, Emma was sedated. She slept for a few hours. After she woke up, she was told everything. Why? She cried. It was all Mickey's fault. It was all his fault. Emma was happy. One of her dreams had come true. Now, every day after work, she took the train to her house. She had planned a renovation, but she didn't want to hire workers. She prepared everything herself. That's what she did all the time. "You're so happy lately," Casey came up to her. "Some changes in your personal life." "I bought a house." She was glowing with happiness. "Wow, when's the housewarming party?" My co-worker was happy for her friend. "Soon," Emma promised. Waiting, Casey went to her seat. In the evening, as usual, Emma wanted to go to the village. Her mother called. "Do you remember that we're going to Grandma's this weekend?" she asked her. "Oh, I completely forgot." The girl slapped her forehead. "We're waiting for you. Don't be late." The woman spoke in a gentle voice. Okay, Emma decided she would definitely come. She hung up the phone and smiled. She remembered her grandmother, how she bored everyone with her story. Now she understood her parents too, who used to cringe when Emma rolled her eyes at the old man's tales. The weekend came and Emma was ready to go. She bought her tickets at the train station, boarded the train, and a few hours later, she was in her hometown. "Hello everyone." She entered her grandmother's apartment. Her mother came out to meet her. Parents behaved cautiously. They knew about everything that was going on with the daughter, so they tried not to push her in any way to think about her husband and children. "Grandma, happy birthday." She walked into the room and handed her a beautiful box. Emma, as usual, can't go without exclusivity. Wrinkles spread across Grandma's face. Everyone sat down at the table. First, as usual, toasts, congratulations, and after Grandma looked at everyone, her eyes became sad. "Well, Grandma, come on, start." It was already a tradition. "We lived as a big family." The grandmother dragged out her story. Emma sat at the table. She had heard this story. A reply came to her, informing her that there was very little information. You need the exact date of birth, where and when he went to serve, when exactly he went missing. At the end, there was a phone number of a specialist who could help answer all the questions. Emma wrote it down. She was going to contact him later. She got home. She definitely needed to go to the village today, but she couldn't make it again. There was a knock on the door. "Hello." Her heart thumped in her chest more often. There was Mickey standing on the doorstep. "Emma, I'm sorry. I can't live without you," he began at once. "Come in." She let him into the apartment. They went into the kitchen. There his wife poured tea, sat down opposite. "Give me your answer," he waited. "I forgave you long ago. But for now, we cannot be together," she told him. "But why?" He didn't understand. "Be patient a little longer," she asked him. "Okay." He stood up. "I love you and I will never betray you again." Emma walked Mickey out. As she closed the doors behind him, there was a pinch in her chest. She didn't want to just take it all back like that. He had to understand that. The time was still not late. The girl decided to make a call. "Emma," she heard a man's voice. "Hello, my name is Emma. I sent you a request about my great-grandfather who disappeared without a vest." She began to speak quickly, afraid that she might not be listened to. "Yes, I wrote you a reply today," the other end of the line confirmed. "I would like to talk about it." She calmed down. She realized that she was ready to listen and help. "Okay, my name is Alexander. You can ask me any questions you want." He was located to her. Emma was ready to talk to him all evening because Alexander knew the answers to many questions. First of all, she told him her grandmother's story that she had heard many times in her life. "Of course, it's all interesting, and if you find the picture, we can do something," he told her. "I've already told my parents to forward me everything my grandmother has," she muttered. "When we find him, I can help you get your great-grandfather's name on the memorial at the Eternal Flame," he suggested. "I think it would please my grandmother." The girl smiled into the phone. "Let's call tomorrow. I'll tell you what to do and how to do it." Before saying goodbye, he said. Emma went to bed. She couldn't calm her body that was horny. She imagined how they would do what Alexander suggested, and then she would tell her grandmother about it. But fatigue made itself felt, and after a while, Emma fell asleep. In the morning, as usual, she had to go to the service. She was in a hurry, wanting to dial Alexander's number as soon as possible. When she did, he said that he had found out everything. "For my part, I will petition your administration to authorize the installation of another stove." He went straight to the point. "Well, thank you for your attitude, but what do I have to do?" It was important to her. Even if Grandma's father can't be found, a slab with the family name on it would already be an accomplishment. "Write the story you told me. Attach all the available documents. Perhaps it will be enough." He really wanted to help. Emma sat at her workplace. She was glowing from within. "Why so happy?" Casey asked her. "Sometimes it's such a joy to do things for others," she admitted. The girl finally realized that there was a reason her grandmother kept telling this story. She sat until the end of the workday and then went to the village where she hadn't been for a long time. She didn't do much there today because there wasn't enough time. The house was big, the yard was the same, and there were outbuildings too. Emma wanted to clean everything. Sometimes something would come to hand, and she would look at it. It took a long time. At the weekend, she decided to do it. "Mickey, hello," she called him. "Hello." He fell silent, waiting to see what else his wife would say. He was afraid she would start talking about divorce. "Why are you tense?" She laughed. "Waiting for you to say." He was silent again. "Remember we wanted to buy a house?" She waited for a reaction. Of course, did she really think he had lost his memory? "Well, I did it, and if you don't mind, you can come back and help me with the repairs." She struggled with the last words. "I love you." He couldn't believe his ears. He arrived, not even an hour later. They took everything they needed and drove to the village. What a place. He looked around, just like she did the first time. "We won't disturb anyone, and neither will we." She stood at the gate. "How many inhabitants are there?" He looked into the distance, where the houses were still standing. "I don't know. We'll get to know each other later." She pushed the gate open. Mickey didn't talk about relationships. He tried not to touch the subject until they got home. He went to get water. Emma had asked him to. He needed to warm her up. At this moment, the girl herself went outside. Suddenly, she heard men's voices. And then where to? She listened. Come on, look for it, and they will sort it out. Cut him short, the second one. The girl went back into the house. For some reason she was afraid, and if she was alone, and here they were. The doors slammed, she shuddered. Are you scared of me? Mickey laughed. Quiet, come here. She waved a finger at him. What is it? The young man tensed. Look, she led him out of the house. There was indeed someone talking outside. What are they doing out there? She whispered to her husband. They seemed to be looking for something, he was sure. Why? And why on our property? Emma had a lot of questions. We should just go out and ask, Mickey was determined. Okay, the girl stood up. They went outside so that they were immediately visible. And what do you want in our precinct? Mickey started asking questions right away. Who are you? The uninvited guests didn't understand. The hosts? Emma replied. What are you telling us? The village is on the verge of extinction. There is almost no one left here, they laughed. If you want, we can show you the document. Emma stood up and put her hands to her sides. We do, one of the men nodded. She hadn't expected that. The file was in the car, in her backpack. She had to go. While she was doing that, the men began to negotiate with Mickey. You see, during the war years, a lot of things happened here. We've been digging for years, and the good stuff is still here, the illegal searcher admitted. And what do you want from me? He got curious. We are a little to your hand, and you do not notice us on your site. He set conditions. I'd have to talk to my wife, afraid to do anything without talking to Emma. Mickey. All right, she'll be here in a minute, one of the buddies said. Emma came back with the papers. Everything was legal. She had no doubt about that. Mickey told her what these people were doing here and what they were asking of them. What are you looking for? She got curious. Various things from the war. We told your husband, they said again. I don't know. I need to consult. She thought she would call Alexander in the evening, and he would give her a precise answer. What a fool you are for refusing money. The one who spoke looked at her angrily. And for the insult, you'll get out of here right now. Mickey didn't stand for it. They returned to the house, where the work was up to their necks, the water already boiling. Emma started scrubbing the floors. Even though they needed to be changed, she still wanted to be clean. After that, the work was done outside again. You don't need to look here. Look, my husband pointed to a machine. Everything is in the shed. They were afraid, probably, in case it was someone else's, the girl concluded. They were coming home, tired but happy. Mickey didn't know if she'd just called him to help or if she'd really forgiven him, and now they'd have everything back to normal. He waited for Emma to start talking about it. Thank you, she said as he opened the doors for her. Give me the bags. He held out his hands. It's not hard for me. She walked toward the entryway. Even though they had lived together for so long and were married, they were now acting like two strangers. They were both shy, as if this was the first time they had met. They entered the entryway, went up to the apartment. Emma, are you sure you've forgiven me and there won't be any complaints? He asked before they entered the apartment. Mickey, I've thought it over. I'm not happy without you. I love you, of course. If this betrayal happens again, there's nothing I can do. She looked at her hands. Emma, I promise you that I will never betray someone close to me again. When you realize it, it's too late. I love you too, and I will for the rest of my life. He hugged her. At home, she told him about Alexander. Mickey appreciated such an act. He had met Sarah more than once and knew her story. Alexander, hello, she called him tonight. Good to hear from you again, he answered her cheerfully. You know, I recently bought a house and she told him about the men who were looking for something on their property. I know what you mean, he was silent. Those who do it for the benefit of people from the state and find objects and remains, then give everything to relatives. For them, it constitutes wealth and memory. and these two are looking for themselves, then they sell everything in the markets. Perhaps they do not give any importance to something and just throw it away, but it would be important. The relatives of those heroes will never get an award or anything else. I thought so. So I sent them away from our territory. Emma liked the way this man spoke to her. She said goodbye to the man, hung up the phone, and turned to Mickey. He stood looking at her. I can't believe we're back together. He wanted to approach her, but didn't dare. It's going to be okay. Emma walked over to him herself. They went to the kitchen. The girl prepared a simple dinner, sat down at the table. You are good. Her husband looked at her. No need for loud words. Nothing has not yet been done. Now when we are two, you can do everything quickly, his wife told him. Yes, I will help and support you in everything. They finished dinner. Emma stayed to wash the dishes and Mickey went to his room. The next day, Emma went to the post office. Her mom called and said she had found some papers, pictures, and some letters. She had collected all of these and sent them to her daughter. If you don't have time, I can do it myself, her husband suggested. You will help me a lot. She was grateful that Mickey supported and helped her in everything. When the girl came home from work, the first thing she did was to start sorting through the papers that had come in. She looked at the picture. It was very pale. It was hard to see anything. The man's facial features were barely visible, but she could see that he was handsome. Emma immediately remembered her grandmother's story, how much people had to go through at that time. Alexander, hello, it's me again. She dialed the phone number. Good evening. Emma didn't understand why he was talking to her like that. I have collected everything that is available, but when and where the grandfather went, no one could say. She reported on the work done. If you want, I can come to you, the young man offered. They had already talked about it. It turned out that Alexander was only 200 kilometers from the town where Emma lived. When will it be convenient for you to do it? I don't know, but I'll let you know, Emma promised. Life went on as usual. The family was quiet, no quarrels, no hard feelings, and no teasing. Mickey did his best to keep his Billy happy. Shall we go to the village? Emma asked him. Of course he was up for it. Emma didn't know why she was drawn to that little house in the abandoned village. She was physically drawn there. Why don't we get to know the locals? Mickey suggested Emma. I wanted to do the whole thing first, so I could invite everyone to visit, she admitted. I see. Let's get to work then. We can hire workers soon. He looked around the walls. They had wallpaper on them. Probably the new owners just glued them on to cover the whitewash and plaster, the girl suggested. No one will tell us that, Mickey was sure. You go to the yard. There's a lot to do there too, and I'll stay here, she commanded. Okay. Mickey had done a lot that day. The yard area was ready for something new to be done on it. Emma started ripping off the wallpaper. It wasn't easy to do. It was glued in place permanently. She managed to get 2 walls done. After that, she sank into a chair to rest. But she wanted to finish everything today, so the girl gathered her strength and started working again. We need to leave immediately, peeked Mickey into the house. What's wrong? She turned and almost fell off the stool. I got called into work, he blushed. Good. She shook off her hands, looked at what little she had left, decided she could finish it tomorrow. They got in the car and drove off. Afterward, Mickey left his wife at home and drove to work. Hi. Emma called her mom. Hello, was the sad woman. I looked through the documents you sent me. I think they will help a lot when searching for great-grandfather, the girl said. Grandmother was ill. That's why Angelica was so sad. Is it serious? Angelica was tense. She's in the hospital. She could hear her mom crying. I hope she gets better. Emma mentally wished Granny well. Why didn't they do this before? Why did they wait so long? But nothing could be done now. The main thing was that the machine was running. Everything would be there soon. She thought about the memorial. She sent an application to the administration. She had contacted them more than once. They promised to consider the matter soon. Mickey wasn't home again. Emma didn't think about it while she was talking to her mom, but as she made her bed, different thoughts popped into her head. She was nervous, wondering if after such a short time he was up to his old tricks. The phone rang in the hallway. Emma wondered who it could be. Emma, she went to the phone. Emma, hi, it was Billy, Mickey's friend. What's wrong? The girl asked immediately. Billy never called their apartment for no reason at all. Come over, Mickey's in the hospital, he told her in a dying voice. What's wrong? She was already screaming. Come to Central Hospital, he hung up. Emma started to pack. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't get into the keyhole when she closed the doors. She hailed a cab. The car was only gone a couple minutes, but to Emma they were an eternity. To the hospital, she called out the address. No need to be so nervous. We can't go any faster anyway. The driver saw how the girl felt. Excuse me, she sat back in the seat, her heart pounding fast. She couldn't believe anything bad could have happened to Mickey. She ran into the hospital lobby, straight to the desk. My husband. Before she could say anything further, Billy came up to her. Let's go. He took her hand and dragged her behind him. They went up to the second floor. There was an operation going on, the young man told her. What happened? Cried Emma. She just couldn't stand it. He was called to work, but he didn't get there. Billy lowered his head. Jesus, him or in him? The girl turned pale and shook even more. Into him, just one sentence, but so terrible. They sat in the hallway. Nobody knew anything. But then, a few hours later, the doctor came out. Is he alive? That's what interested Emma the most. Of course, even the man was taken aback. What's wrong with him? Emma wanted to know. She was so sick. She didn't understand a thing. Everything will be fine. The doctor put his hand on her shoulder. After that, Emma calmed down. She walked over, sat down on the couch, looked at Billy. How did you know about that? She wanted to know why Mickey hadn't called her. I'm the one who bumped into him. He just sat there with his head down like that. What? The girl jumped to her feet. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. He covered his eyes with his hands. Scoundrel. Emma had always disliked the man. He was always encouraging Mickey to do something dark. And now this had happened. She would never have believed it was an accident. I know, he seemed to realize it himself. When Emma was satisfied that Mickey was fine and his condition was stable, she drove home. Billy begged her not to report it, but she wasn't going to. She wanted to wait for her husband to recover. She needed something to do to keep her mind off things. Emma started driving again, to work in the morning and to the village in the evening. She walked into the house. She remembered she only had one wall left. Emma grabbed the wallpaper and pulled on it. It started to come off along with the plaster or lime. The plaster fell to the floor. There was still a lot left on the wall. The girl worked tirelessly. Late, she looked at her watch. By car was convenient, but on the electric train, you had to keep track of time. Okay. She took one last tug. Everything fell to the floor again. Emma grabbed her bag. She thought, she'll definitely finish everything tomorrow. She left the house and ran to the station. The girl managed to catch her electric train. She was glad of that, otherwise, she would be late for work tomorrow. She drove on and wondered what was going on with Mickey. She wanted so badly to help him, but there was nothing she could do. And then her thoughts went back to Billy. How could he do that? And more importantly, why? But she would find that out from her husband when he got home. The house was quiet and boring again. Emma sat down at the table and started going through her great-grandfather's letters again. The handwriting was uneven. Everything was faded, but some of the letters were legible. Why didn't Grandma read them to us? It would have been more interesting, she said into the empty kitchen. Then Emma remembered her grandmother was in the hospital. She dialed her mother's number. How is our old lady? She asked the woman. The same. No change. Mom was crying. And we had an emergency too. Emma told her mother about Mickey. God, what a disaster. She couldn't believe it had all happened in one day. She decided she wasn't going to wait long. She'd go to work and go straight to her cottage to finish the job. That evening she didn't even have dinner. She had to get to the hospital in time to see her husband. When she arrived, he was already in a regular room. Emma went in, smiled and cried at the same time. "How are you, darling?" she asked him. "You know, it's not so bad," he told her. Both of his legs were broken and something was damaged inside, so they had to operate. Emma sat beside him. She knew he was alive, and that's the most important thing. "Do you know who drove into you?" she asked. "Yes, I know. He came over already," apologized, Mickey told her. What could have happened? Why did he do that? She still didn't understand. "While you and I were apart, I made Jenka my deputy in my firm. Apparently, that wasn't enough for him, and he decided to make sure I wasn't there." He looked at her. "That's stupid," she smiled. "You realize it's stupid, but he probably didn't. And when he did, it was too late, especially since I was a survivor. He comes begging me to drop the application, staring at Mickey's ceiling." "And what did you do?" She was looking at him. "Well, he'll restore my car, but otherwise, let him go," he told her. Emma hugged her husband, kissed him and said goodbye. Then she went home. Tonight, she couldn't sleep. She had some nightmares. In the morning, she woke up not sleeping at all. She didn't understand anything at work. Her co-workers noticed it. "Did something happen to you again?" Casey came up to her. "No, I'm fine. Mickey's already gone." The girl looked at her. "She just didn't sleep well," she admitted to her. "All right, I was thinking about it." Her friend pulled away from her. Emma knew she had to go to the village today. She wanted to do it quickly, but something kept stopping her. She got home, changed her clothes, and left the house again. She had to catch the train. "That's it. One more push, and she could hire workers," she said to herself. Emma already regretted that she hadn't done it right away. It would probably be ready by now. She brought the bags to collect all the trash in them and set to work. When she got to the wall, she did the last one yesterday. She bent down to pick it up and noticed something written on the wall. What was it? She got up and looked closely. There was an inscription, something strange. The letters were jagged. "We've been standing here for 13 days, 16 of us. We haven't retreated." Emma spelled it out. And at the bottom were scratched initials and surnames. Everything was so indistinct. But the girl was already interested. She came closer and began to read the letters. Something was badly erased. She didn't continue. She straightened up and froze. Emma stood staring at that wall of inscriptions without blinking. Tears flowed from her eyes. The meaning of the phrase came to her first, and then, like a bolt of lightning. "Oliver," she screamed, "it can't be." She started thrashing around the house. She didn't know what she was looking for or what to do. Her hands were shaking. Was she really in the very place where her great-grandfather had been in the last moment of his life? The excitement and accumulated troubles took their toll. The girl sat down on the floor and cried. She touched the wall with her hand and wondered if she had imagined it. She stood up and looked again. No, it was all true. Her hands were shaking so bad, she couldn't even hold the phone. When Emma rode in the train, she had already calmed down a little. What if it wasn't her great-grandfather at all? Alexander, hello. Now she didn't care what time it was or whether she disturbed him or not. What happened? He heard that the girl was very excited. "I found the inscription," she shouted into the phone. "What inscription? What do you mean?" He didn't understand. "In the house in my house, remember, I told you, where they were looking for wartime objects," she gabbled. What was the inscription? He still couldn't make anything out of Emma's rambling conversation. "You wanted to come," she was crying. "Yes, I'll be at your place this weekend," he promised. "I'm waiting for you. If you can make it sooner, then come," she asked. Her hands were shaking. Her head was not thinking straight. Emma went to the kitchen, took out some pills, and drank a sedative. After a few minutes, she just wanted to sleep. Emma didn't resist her body. She went and lay down. She needed to calm down. Lots to do today. She got up in the morning. Emma arrived at work, immediately called Casey over to talk to her. "Why are you so disheveled?" she asked. "You won't believe it. Remember I told you about the house I bought?" Emma asked her friend. "Yeah, what happened?" Casey could see how excited Emma was. "I found an inscription that was left during the war years. The girl was acting like she was out of it." So, Casey didn't understand all those words. Okay. Emma stepped away from her. She wanted to talk to someone about it, but she couldn't because no one but Mickey knew about it. "Mickey," she stopped in the middle of the hallway. "Hi, excuse me. Can I take a few days of vacation time?" She ran into the supervisor's office. "What's your emergency?" He got curious. For family reasons, it was half true. Of course, he put a piece of paper and a pen in front of the girl. She wrote a statement, immediately took a bag, and went to the hospital. She went straight to her husband's room. "Hello, darling." She went over and kissed him. "You look like you've been through a lot," he grinned. "Not funny." She sat down beside him. "Tell me about it." He saw that Emma was with the news. "Mickey in our house there," Emma cried. "What's there?" He wanted to get up, but pain shot through his whole body. He couldn't do it. The inscription. She looked around at the people who were in the room with her husband. They looked at her like she was crazy. What was the inscription, he wondered. Okay, later, she decided not to say in front of everyone. Emma went home. She needed to get herself in order, not only her body, but also her nerves. She took another sedative and lay down, then remembered to call her mother. "Mommy, I'll probably soon find out where our grandmother's father died," she spoke loudly. "Did you get any answers?" Mother guessed. "No, but I didn't know how to tell the woman." She did not say anything, hung up the phone, went to the bedroom and lay down. After that, she got up again, took out the documents of great-grandfather, but there was no connection between them. The next day, Alexander called, said that he would come in the evening. "I'm waiting for you," answered the already calm Emma. She couldn't believe what was happening in her life. She thought it couldn't all be a coincidence. For some reason, she didn't want to buy an apartment, and they had been looking for a house for a long time. And it was in this village, this very house, that Emma's thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell. She snapped out of her seat, opened it. An unfamiliar man stood on the threshold. "Alexander," he smiled. "Emma," she let him into the apartment. He was just a simple guy, tall, skinny, nothing special. "Show him." They sat in the kitchen. She poured him some tea. "Here," the girl put some papers in front of him. "Yes, this is very good. I can tell you that there is a good chance of finding your relative." He sat looking at the photo. A few hours later, Emma and Alexander were in the village. She immediately took him to that wall. The young man photographed everything. After that, he sent all the data to his office. "And now what?" Emma wondered. "The guys will come, we'll look at everything here, and in the meantime we'll look at the documents about the battles in this village," he said. "It would be interesting," she cried. "Come on." He put his arm around Emma. She looked at him. For some reason, she felt so at peace. "Thank you. It means a lot to me." Emma couldn't help herself. "And me too. The more we find missing soldiers, the calmer the relatives will be." He showed the girl the pictures where the remains were buried. "Your organization does a lot of good things," Emma reassured herself. They didn't do anything else. They just waited for the train to arrive and drove back. "You can stay at my place," the girl said to Alexander. "The husband won't say anything?" the young man asked. No, she knew that for sure. "Then I will accept your offer," he smiled. In the evening, they sat in the kitchen. The guy told so many interesting things, where and with whom they were, the finds they brought back from each business trip. "And we will be able to determine whether it was my grandfather or not?" she asked him. "I think we will," he nodded. Emma was so easy and relaxed with him. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't thinking about anything. She felt like all of her worries were transferred to him. The guys will work on the information I sent them today, and by the time I arrive, they will have a lot to say, Alexander said and said. Good. Emma realized this was not a quick matter. She made a bed for the young man in the hall and went to the bedroom herself. The night passed quietly. Emma somehow calmed down. Now she thought only about how she would tell her grandmother about her and not only fines. In the morning, they had breakfast. Alexander had some work to do, and then he called Emma to go to the village again. She asked him to wait. She had to go to the hospital to see her husband, and he didn't mind at all. I'll be quick, she told him from the doorway. Good. He looked after her. Emma arrived at Mickey's. He was still lying motionless. Any movement was painful. She told him what had happened in the last 24 hours. She wasn't shouting now. She wasn't nervous. She did and said everything calmly. I congratulate you. You have done a great thing, he smiled. I don't understand how all this could have happened. She saw that others were looking at her and listening. If you really want to, Mickey said. Yes, and that's true. She sighed and stood up, because they were waiting for her at home. Bye, do whatever you need to do. He took her hand. Come on, get well. I'll come tomorrow, as usual. She kissed him and went. After that, together with the young man, they went to the village. There he began his work. Do you need help? Emma was always hanging around. Not yet. He realized that she couldn't sit idle. Well, when you do, just whistle, she laughed. Alexander continued on as a group of people appeared on the horizon. Emma looked at them. She realized that this was the search party. We're here. She waved at them with both hands. There was a girl among the young people. This pleased Emma. She thought she would not be alone. Further, everything happened quickly. The guys set up camp right here. They had everything they needed for that. Small fences, bags, shovels, trowels, scoops, some maps. Emma was interested in everything. Even the village was getting a bit cheerful. So we start here, Alexander said, pointing to the wall of the house. They began to pierce the ground with bayonets, searching for anything. If they found a thing, or even better, a bone, then the painstaking work began. During the day, we managed to find 2 skeletons. They were about a meter away from the house. It was scary, but at the same time interesting for Emma. The search continued. Everything was so monotonous that the girl decided to go look for someone who might know about what was going on here in those times. Hello. She saw a woman walking through the gate of one of the remaining houses. Good afternoon, she turned to her. My name is Emma. I'm the owner of that house over there, she said. And I'm Maria. She waited for the girl to approach her. Nice to meet you. Emma reached her. And what is it that you have going on there? Probably everyone was curious, just did not dare to ask. Do you know what happened here during the war? Asked a question, with which the girl came. My father told me, and you go over there. He lived here then. When he was a child, the woman pointed to the side. Emma saw that there was still a house there. Do you live here? I wondered how many people were left. No. We moved to the city a long time ago. We come here for berries, mushrooms, yes, to relax from the bustle of the city, smiled Maria. That's why we bought the property here. Emma thanked her for everything and went on her way. The cottage was old. It was almost completely settled. The windows stood on the ground. Near the gate, a grey-haired old man was sitting on a stoop. Emma walked up to him. Hello, she looked into his eyes. Who are you? The old man spoke, but neither his head nor his eyes moved. Say, here she thought she didn't recognize his name. Do you know what happened here during the war? She asked him. Why do you want to know? Apparently, he was interested in the question, because he turned his head. I bought a house here. She pointed in the direction. Now there are search parties working there. Ah, Harvey's awake. Do you remember anything? It was obvious that the grandfather was worried for a reason. Of course he did. His voice trembled. Will you tell me? She was pulling the words out of him like a pincer. Come on. He got up and walked into the fence. Emma followed him. As they bent down to enter the hut, a foul odor hit her nose. Emma looked around. There were pictures hanging on all the walls. I've lived in this village all my life, born here, and I'll die here. At that time, we thought that the Germans would never reach us. They would pass us by. The village was big. He made a circle with his hand. Where did the soldiers come from? Emma sat down on the edge of the stool that stood there. They were relocating. They came in, probably to ask for something. It was obvious that Harvey didn't know that for sure. How old were you? The girl was counting in her mind. 8, he glared at her. A toddler, she stood up again. Went to see who was in the pictures. You have 8-year-olds now, but we were working as adults back then. Harvey turned away. Well, why did you invite me here? She didn't mind going outside. Here, he handed her a photograph that was as faded as hers. Who's that? She looked at it. Mother and father, they were helping them then, Harvey said tearfully. Let's go. Emma took a step toward the exit. They were back on the street before the girl had learned anything much. What else can you tell me? She looked at the man. They came into the village and started killing anyone who resisted them. They settled in houses, wherever they could. Naturally, the owners were afraid, so they fed the enemy. Those guys who had entered your hut shortly before had to hide. So they hid, he began to tell me. Do you remember it all? Emma wondered. He took a small piece of newspaper out of his pocket, poured tobacco into it, licked it, twisted it, and there was such a commotion. The Germans didn't suspect. They were quietly barbarizing themselves. But when reinforcements arrived, that's when it all started. I don't know how, but they found out about the soldiers, and the nightmare began. Where are you going? Grandpa got up and walked. He didn't look back. Emma caught up with him. Harvey was silent. He was heading towards that house where Alexander and his companions were. The girl thought he had something else to show or tell. On the way, she thought how much this man had been through. At such a young age, to live through a nightmare. He led her to a small ravine. Soldiers, Emma asked. Know us, he turned to her. Who are you? She looked at him puzzled. Everyone who stayed in the village. The police didn't spare anyone back then, and we had 2 of them. Brothers who had gone over to the other side. He stood looking at the place. What about? She wanted to ask, but the words stuck in her throat. Me? He turned around. Emma thought he was smiling, but she couldn't see it because of his beard and mustache. Yeah, she felt like she was in a movie, transported back a few years. We were lined up, women were screaming, children were roaring, but the Germans didn't feel sorry for anyone. They just opened fire. I don't know, God saved me. I fell with everyone else, hit a little, covered with bodies, but I was alive. The old man's eyes became moist. God, she covered her mouth with her hands. The soldiers at first sat in cover. Only lone shots were heard. But when the rampage began, that's when everything came to light. The Germans were bringing reinforcements. It was clear that ours could not cope. Those who wanted to went into the woods, but many stayed. They held out to the last, and when the Germans surrounded the house, no one was afraid anymore. At that moment, they reached the very house that Emma had bought. Hello. The boys were digging in the ground. They found something again. Did it say on the wall that they were here for 13 days? The girl looked at Harvey. I won't say how long, but it lasted a long time. It seemed like it would never end. He paused. What? Emma almost ran into him. They ran. 2 were put down here. He pointed to the spot where the remains. You're welcome for now. He said goodbye and hung up. All the remains were examined. Many had shell casings where a piece of paper with names was enclosed. Those who didn't have any were reconstructed with the help of specialists. 10 families received notices that their father, brother, grandfather, or great-grandfather was found in such and such an area. Burials were made. "Alexander, you are so good," Emma thanked him. "If it wasn't for you, none of this would have happened," he replied. Mickey couldn't yet, so Emma drove to her relative's house alone. "Hello." She walked into the apartment where her parents lived. There was silence in response. She walked to the kitchen, made some tea, decided to wait. But it was already evening, and no one was home. Interestingly, she dialed her mother's number repeatedly, but the subscriber was off the network. When Emma was about to go to bed, the front door opened and she stepped out into the hallway. "Emma, why didn't you call?" Mom was surprised. "Why, so I can't come already?" She walked over to the woman and hugged her. "Of course you can." The woman responded to the hug. "Where have you been?" She looked at the woman. She was tired. "Sarah, your grandmother." She fell silent. "What's wrong with her?" Emma's heart sank. "She's in a coma." A tear slid down her mother's cheek. "But she's not dead," Emma exhaled. "Yes, but the doctor doesn't give any positive guarantees." Mom sat down on the chair. "Mommy, I have some news." She took the woman's hands. "What news?" She looked up. Emma understood that her mother was tired, but she still wanted to tell her everything she had learned in the last few days. "We've heard the story so many times from Grandma, and now I've seen it all with my own eyes. I found out where our grandfather was, what he was doing, how he lived his last day. Not everything Grandma said was true, and how could she know? She was a child." Emma was excited. She couldn't believe what she was saying when she said it. "Wow, you've got a story going on there." The mother sat and looked at her daughter. "Yes, I didn't expect it myself. I had to go to bed. Tomorrow was a big day." "Good night." The women hugged again. Emma couldn't sleep. Now that she had told her mom about everything, she had a chill. She knew that tomorrow they were due to announce that another name would appear on the memorial. It wasn't until a day ago that she herself found out about it. Alexander had reported it. Then she was once again convinced they were doing their job perfectly. "Daughter, wake up." Angelica entered her room. Yes, now she was shattered because she hadn't slept in a long time. They were getting ready. Everyone was depressed because basically everything was being done for Grandma and she couldn't right now. How could it be? Emma lamented. She had waited all her life for this moment, and now that it was happening, she couldn't be here. Life, a complicated thing. Her mother approached her. A lot of people had gathered for the event, all curious about what was going on here. Solemnly announced who was being felt here, and after that the cloth with which the slab was covered was removed. "Well, now our relative will be here," touched the woman letters. "Yes, and this is all thanks to the guys who do everything for people without sparing their strength." Emma was proud that she personally knows such. It was quiet at Grandma's hospital. Emma sat there and told her what had happened and how it had happened. "She can hear you." A nurse quietly came up behind her. "Yes, I hope so," the girl spoke softly. It was time to go home. Mickey had been discharged. He needed her help. "Hello," she walked into him. "Hello." He felt bad that he had missed everything. "Let's go." Emma helped him up. They were home. Nothing much was going on. "Alexander told me to come to the village." She looked at her husband. "If you have to go," was fine with Mickey. Emma looked at him. She realized she had nothing for this man. Maybe she needed him to apologize or something. That's why she took him back. The girl was on her way to her house. Yes, that's what she thought. Not her and Mickey's, but her own. "Good afternoon." Alexander was already waiting for her there. She walked up to him, smiling. "Why are we all here again?" Emma asked. "It's a surprise." He walked over to her and took her under his arm. They went to the place where the soldiers had been shot. There was some kind of daze. What was it? Emma understood that they had decided to immortalize the place, but she could not imagine what was under the cloth. Alexander waited until everyone who was in the village at that moment approached. Then he made a speech. It said that nowadays young people do not remember the heroes of that war. It is necessary to remind and support what these soldiers did. They fought for the motherland without sparing their lives. After these words, he pulled down the cloth with a sharp movement. What was there shocked everyone, especially Emma. "Alexander, how did you do that?" She looked back at her house. "I'm sorry I didn't ask, but I don't think you would have said no," he said quietly. The memorial consisted of the very same inscription Emma had found on the wall of the cabin. It had just been cut down, restored, covered with some kind of product. "It's so beautiful," Maria said. Emma looked at Harvey, he was crying. She thanked everyone, then went to her room with Alexander. "That was it," he looked at her. "It seemed like two strangers," she said to herself and him, "but you've become so close to me." They hugged. And after that, Emma stayed in the cabin a little longer, seeing what was there now, and went to the station. Emma went to the door of the apartment where she and Mickey lived. She opened it with her key. Suddenly, a woman's laughter came from the room. Emma tensed. Who could it be? She walked quietly down the hallway, peeked into the room. Mickey was sitting on the couch with an unfamiliar woman beside him. "Hello," she entered the room. "Emma?" He straightened up sharply. "What, you didn't expect?" She stood looking at the couple. "You'll be here tonight, won't you?" His eyes were running. "People don't change." Emma went to the room. She pulled out her suitcase and started packing. Some rummaging and whispering could be heard in the hallway. Emma was so disgusted by it all. I guess it was true what people say, that whatever is done is for the best. It was a good thing that the accident had happened then, and he hadn't been there. She heard the clatter of crutches on the floor, turned around. Mickey was standing in the doorway. "I'm leaving. I don't think you'll mind if the cabin stays for me." She didn't even want to look at him. "I'm sorry. I know what I did was wrong." He was having a hard time standing. "So you're not the one for my life." There was no yelling, nothing like that. Emma wanted to wash herself, but there was nowhere to do it yet. She felt like she had been doused in slop. Emma was on her way to her village where there was a cabin. There was no sadness at all. She had come to the place where everything was known. This was where her great-grandfather had spent his days, could be considered his family nest. Maria stood at the gate. "Hello." The girl was surprised by her visit. "Oh, I'm coming to you. I'm standing here, listening, whether you are there or not." The woman began to gibber. "And what did you want?" Emma was pleased that she was known and respected here. "Let's go." She took her hand and led the way. Emma followed obediently behind the woman. She couldn't figure out what the woman wanted from her. When they entered her house, the girl saw that everything was cozy and beautiful. "What are you going to do there? Sit down, drink tea. Now I will heat the bath." Maria began to bother. Emma liked this proposal. She would love to go to the bath. "And how did you know that I'm coming?" Became curious to the girl. "Tom, a neighbor boy, saw you at the station," she smiled. "Well, yes, it's a village," laughed the girl. "Well, come on, tell me why you have things with you. The house is not ready yet." Sat down opposite the woman. Emma did not go into details, just told her superficially what had happened. "Don't worry, girl. Everything will be fine," the woman told her. "And I am not worried. In my life has happened such a miracle, which others cannot even imagine." She looked out the window, which was visible monument to her great-grandfather. "Exactly. Now let's go to the bath," she encouraged her. Emma enjoyed the water and the warmth of the bathhouse. She came out of there in just a sheet, her hair falling to her shoulders. "Emma?" She heard a familiar voice say. "Alexander." She couldn't believe it was him. He was walking towards her, and she stood holding the fabric with her hand. "Hello." He was so close the girl could feel his warmth. "There, I was so attracted to this place that I came back here again." He looked at her. In fact, the young man was deceiving. He really had come back to this village on his own. No one had forced him. He had come to see her. He knew he wouldn't be caught, and later Maria came to him. They met in the street. She told him Emma was at her house, so he came. "Okay, come in." She didn't know what Maria would say, but she didn't care much right now. They went to the kitchen. Emma was uncomfortable in one sheet. She left for a few minutes in the room. She came back in jeans and a t-shirt. It was good here. Alexander had already poured tea. After that, Maria came in. She smiled mysteriously, but did not say anything. "Shall we go for a walk?" Alexander called out to Emma. He wanted to go back to her house. Good, she liked Alexander. Once they were inside, and realizing how much work there was to be done here, the young man came close to her. "I lied to you. I came to see you." He was close again. She could feel him. "And I'm very happy about it," she told him in the same tone of voice. "What about your husband?" Emma felt him tense up. No more husband, and it was true. "Emma," he took her hand, "I liked you." "And I like you." She'd never admitted that openly to anyone. "Will you come with me?" he asked her. "No, I have to finish up here." She looked around the house. "Then let me help you here," he begged. Okay, she didn't mind. Emma needed to go to town. She had to do something about the job. Alexander offered to help her. "What are you going to do?" he asked her on the way. "I'll probably quit, because I'm not going to be able to travel so much. I have money for the first time. And then I'll think of something." She had already thought about it. They were in town when her mother called. "Emma, are you in the village?" she asked her. "No." The girl got worried. "Come, Grandma's gone," the woman cried into the phone. All the same, did not live to see, did not recognize. Emma began to settle down. Alexander reacted instantly. "What?" He looked at her. "Grandmother, the same daughter of Oliver, with whom our story with you began," said the girl. "Let's go." He was ready. "Thank you, you're so responsive." Emma got into the car. They drove to the town where Emma's mother and grandmother lived. Alexander was telling all the way that people can be grateful and not so grateful. And Emma looked at him and saw that this man was her destiny. They arrived. Her mother and father had practically done everything. The farewell was to be the next day. It was decided that Sarah would be buried with her father. "You help your parents, and I'll take care of the rest." Alexander was in his element. "Where's Mickey?" Angelique was surprised. "And your son-in-law has a new love again," Emma said with a laugh. "Yes, and you had to come back for that." Father was indignant. "Okay, let this story go." The girl did not want to remember anything. Alexander really did everything. The farewell passed. Everyone went to the cemetery. Their Sarah was given a final farewell with all honors. "I hope you will meet there," Emma whispered quietly as she passed her grandmother's body. "What are you whispering?" Alexander wondered. And then there was lunch and a sit-down at his parents' house. Everyone liked Alexander. He made a good impression. "Happy holidays, children," their mother saw them off. They bought some building materials and went to the village. There, Alexander did everything he could with his own hands. "Let me call the construction company," she asked him. "And when are you going to file for divorce?" Just interested in the young man. "It is necessary to go to the city." She went up. If she asks about it, it means not for nothing. Tomorrow, he wanted to be there all the time. The next day, the application was filed. Now Emma felt some kind of freedom. She realized that she and Alexander would be together. Emma called the workers, and they started to do everything. At the place where part of the wall was missing, they could make a window, the girl suggested. Well, they agreed with all her ideas. A month later, the house was unrecognizable. Both outside and inside it was a candy. They could move in. Emma was a free woman by then. Alexander was traveling back and forth. He couldn't leave his boys behind, but he couldn't leave Emma behind either. It took him a long time to travel, but the girl did not want to leave the village. "Emma, I'm coming for you." He was willing to do anything to persuade her today. You know my answer. She loved him and missed him too. But she loved this place so much she wouldn't leave for anything. Will you be my wife? He asked the question in his forehead and took the ring out of his pocket. Alexander. She didn't expect it so soon. What is your answer to that? After all, a wife should be by her husband's side everywhere, he manipulated. Okay, if you promise to spend every weekend here, she had her own terms. Okay, even if I can't, you'll drive alone, he smiled. They went to the neighbors, told them they were leaving. The house needed looking after. They didn't want to leave it to its fate. Of course, Grandma Maria stayed to watch, and Harvey volunteered to help. He and Emma got on well together. She often visited him, and he often visited her. His stories were endless. Well, goodbye, my darlings. Emma hugged them. What are you saying goodbye to? As if for good, the neighbor came up to her. Who knows? Emma tried not to cry. She got into the car with Alexander. He looked out the window and they drove off. When are we going to go to my parents? Because they should know the news too. The girl asked him. If you want, we can do it right now. They haven't left the village yet. I want to, she said cheerfully. Alexander made a small U-turn, and there they were on the road. We'll go to Grandma's, Emma said. Sure, we'll do everything as you say you want, and he put his hand on her knee. Her mother wasn't expecting them. She opened the door and gasped. Where are you from? The woman began to fuss. I came to introduce you. Her mother winked at her. But we know each other, the mother didn't understand. Do you know my fiancé? Emma asked. No way. Angelica was happy that her daughter was happy. In the evening, when everyone was sitting at the table, the mother poured tea for everyone. Afterwards, Alexander and his father went somewhere and the women were left alone. I have never been to your house, her mother said reproachfully. That's right, Emma thought. So maybe we should have a girls' night out there, Angelica suggested. Why, we'll go there tomorrow. The girl got up from the table. She was so excited that her mom had thought of this, and she hadn't even realized it. Casey, Emma called to her. Oh, it's been a long time, she said instead of greeting. Pack up, we'll pick you up tomorrow, her friend told her. What's wrong? Where are you going? My friend didn't understand. We're having a hen party, Emma shouted. This had never happened to her before. They started making a grocery list to make a menu. And then Alexander came back. He saw Emma glowing. What are you doing? The young man came over and kissed her. We need to go to the village. She did not ask, Emma asserted. Then the girl's mother explained everything to the guy. He understood. Good, and I'll work for a while. He was ready to do anything for her. The next day in the deserted village, which was considered dying, a real fun unfolded. Maria, Angelica, Casey, and a couple of other village girls were there. Well, Emma, good luck to you. They raised their glasses. And she knew she'd be happy without it. Alexander, I'm ashamed to ask you, but we need to get everyone home. She looked at him. And I have another thing to do there. Good. He didn't even have to ask. Yesterday, when she met Maria, Emma felt sick. The neighbor smiled, said she was pregnant. How come? Do you have X-ray vision? Laughed Emma. Now she wanted to be sure. They stopped by the pharmacy, bought a test. It was pregnancy. In town, Emma asked him to take her to the cemetery. When they arrived, he got out of the car and opened the doors. They quickly found Grandma's grave. Emma squatted near the monument. Now I realize why you spent your whole life telling your story. You knew we would meet, Emma began to say. Do you think it was fate, not chance? Alexander touched her shoulder. Yes, she turned to him and nodded. She also looked at him with her eyes. Children, we were here not long ago. Let's go home, said the mother. Yes, we were, but there was something I didn't know yet, Emma intrigued, as she liked to do. And what was that? They looked at her and waited for an answer. Grandma, the memory of your father will live forever. She touched her stomach. Emma, Alexander approached her. If we have a boy, he will be called Oliver. She turned to him.